Hi guys! Today's story is called Dr. Elise, the Royal Lady with the Lamp. I hope you enjoy watching, so don't forget to like it. Thank you! Anyone who dreams of wearing a crown must take into account the weight of this crown. Alice de Roland was sentenced to death for her terrible crimes against the country. This girl was highly respected in the kingdom. The title and beauty were a source of pride for Alice, but at the same time, it was her curse. In this world, it was she who destroyed her own family. However, she was later reborn as a doctor, retaining all her previous memories. Alice hoped that by helping people, she could atone for her guilt. The girl inquired about the patient's condition. Everyone was sincerely happy because salvation had come to them, but fate decreed otherwise. The plane she was flying in crashed. When Alice opened her eyes, she did not understand what had happened. Something had to be done, but she didn't understand where she was. The doors opened in front of her, and inside sat her parents, who were delighted to see Alice. She returned back to her world, where she was 16 years old again. Alice asked His Highness to annul their marriage contract. She renounced her brother and admitted that she did not want and could not become queen, all because now she dreams of becoming a great doctor. Even chronic diseases can be cured if you make an effort. Alice will do everything she can to make the country flourish. It may be possible to try to remove the patient's spleen to give him a chance of survival. The doctor admitted that it was possible, but he did not understand who could perform such an operation. Alice wondered what to do. If she raised her hand, she would surprise everyone. But if nothing is done, the patient will die. So it doesn't matter. We have to fight to the end. And Alice said that she would be the one to perform the operation. She said she agreed to this, as long as she didn't stoop too low. Everyone was in complete shock. But Alice believed that her duty as a doctor was to save other people's lives. 2018, Earth. She was on a plane when passengers were told the ship had encountered turbulence and was off course. The engine failed, and it was necessary to prepare for an emergency evacuation. Alice had absolutely no idea what to do, because everything seemed doomed. But she believed that she could not die like this, because she tried to atone for the sins of her past life and did not understand why she had to die like this. Her name was Song Ji-hyun, and she was the youngest and most talented surgeon, the goddess of surgery, the monster of medicine, a rare nugget. She was called by many names. When they saw her, they began to rejoice, because Professor Song was a real professional. The girl remembered her life and past incarnation, and she could not understand why she had to suffer so much in her past life. She missed her dead family very much. Father, brothers, she loved everyone, and remembering her first life, all this time she tried to help people, and today she was destined to die in this plane crash. She decided that she couldn't die, but there was nothing she could do. And then I just opened my eyes and thought that it was all a dream. Everything around seemed surprisingly familiar. Someone knocked on her door and called her Madam. Alice was surprised to hear this, and looking in the mirror, she realized that she had been reborn. She had absolutely no idea what was happening when she saw herself in Alice's body. Mary brought her some food and did not understand why the lady was behaving so strangely. Mary thought that Alice was unwell, but Alice did not understand why the maid was so worried. She said that it was all because the lady was too calm. Then Alice remembered that here she was, Alice de Roland, evil, cruel, capricious. The servants were afraid of her. She was a real devil in the flesh. At this age, she had not yet made any fatal mistakes. But later, there were a lot of them. She decided that this time she would not allow something like this to happen, and would not live as before. Alice returned here 10 days before the events, and her soul became a little calmer. Although doubts overcame her, she decided, what will be, will be. Well, since Alice has now started a new life, she will take care of it, even if it is still unusual for her to be here. She was still sure that she would not become the same Alice. Suddenly, she turned to Mary, and the maid became very frightened. The maid was afraid that Alice would get angry again. However, Alice simply said that she was wondering if her 10-day confinement had come to an end. She felt uncomfortable sitting in one room for so long, and the maid confirmed that today was indeed the last day. To be honest, Alice didn't even know why she was locked up, but she had time to think about a lot. The maid noticed that, by the way, the Marquis mentioned her during dinner. He told the girl to join the family dinner. Alice was shocked when she found out that her father and stepmother would be there. The maid added that, except for one of her brothers, all the others would be there. Hearing this, Alice was very happy. After 2 lives, she would finally be able to see her family. She was already standing in the doorway and did not understand why she was hesitating. She wanted to see them as soon as possible. Everyone was alive, and she didn't even dare hope for more. She came up and saw her father, stepmother, and brother. Alice said that she loved them very much and burst into tears. Her family was in shock and did not understand what had happened to her. They decided that something was wrong with Alice, and the girl said that she also asks them for forgiveness. But the father noted that it was he who should ask for forgiveness. However, Alice still believed that she was to blame because she was sure that she had done something terrible, broken something valuable, or yelled at the servants. She hasn't had time to do all this yet, which means she has time not to repeat her mistakes. Father had a feeling that Alice had changed, and it was very strange. The girl asked Mary to leave, saying that she could handle everything herself, but the maid noticed that the mistress could get hurt, and therefore it was not worth it. Alice smiled and replied that there was no need to worry. Everything was fine. Besides, she had some things to do that she would do right now. Mary was in shock. She couldn't believe that it was really their mistress in front of her. But who else but her could be so dazzlingly beautiful? The girl smiled and said that she was very grateful to the maid for the sweets. Mary was clearly confused and thinking about the events that had happened since last night's dinner. Alice went to the servants who had previously suffered from her behavior. She didn't come to humiliate anyone, but simply to apologize to them as a human being. Now Alice smiles at everyone and shows attention, although previously it was believed that she was cold and evil. As soon as she learned about Hans's mother's illness, she immediately allocated funds for treatment. And when it became known that her sister was expecting a child, Alice gave her the necessary gifts. She even visited the maid herself, who was ill, and brought medicine with her. In the summer, everyone began to think that Alice was possessed by an angel. If this was so, then Mary sincerely hoped that this angel would remain in the lady for a long time. She wished with all her heart that Mrs. Alice would always remain the way she was now. Perhaps with age came the realization. Because time flew by unnoticed, she walked up to Marquis Roland and apologized for distracting him again. Alice noticed that her father must be tired after work and brought him a drink so that he could relax a little. Suddenly, she felt that her father was looking at her strangely, and she carefully asked what was the matter. She didn't understand what had happened, but the Marquis said that everything was fine. He was just a little surprised. As a child, there were rumors about her that she had no parents. They also said that people like her shouldn't be played with because she was a street child. At that time, Alice really didn't have a family to bring joy to. Now she can do it and will definitely try. She asked her father if he liked the tea, and he replied that the taste was simply wonderful. He added that tea never tasted so good at the palace, and he was curious how she made it. In her previous life, Alice trained hard to somehow attract the attention of Crown Prince Link. She admitted that she was just trying for his sake. After these words, she said that she was already getting ready to leave. Perhaps she is disturbing her father's work, and they will see each other later, at dinner. Alice had changed so much lately that the Marquis began to worry a little about it. This cup of tea became more valuable to him than any treasure. She still had 10 years left before the decisive battle. She needed to remember everything that would happen during this time in order to be fully prepared. During the Second Crimean Campaign, the youngest of her brothers will die. The stepmother will die from a serious illness caused by the machinations of Tristan's family, who were preparing a betrayal. Her family will be wiped off the face of the earth, and the older brother who covered for her will be executed, like their father. During the First Crimean Campaign, the entire army will be infected with deadly emissions. The ruler will die from an incurable disease, and Duchess Hubble will die from progressive Parkinson's. After the end of the Crimean Campaign, an epidemic will break out in the east, and a 3-year quarantine will be introduced in the south. The death toll will reach 70,000 people. The second case of the pandemic will hit the capital of London, where the death toll will reach 100,000. Alice wasn't sure if her medical knowledge could help all these people. Even though she was a surgeon, her abilities were limited. But it seemed she could still help a little. In the coming days, she had to talk to her father. The girl would like to take up medical practice. But suddenly, she thought about it and realized that perhaps she was missing something important. After all, in the year 283, according to the imperial calendar, Link and Alice were supposed to announce their engagement. It became especially clear at dinner that very day. Alice realized that there were only 2 months left until July 7th. It was from that reception that all the dinners began. Mother asked Alice if she had lost her appetite. The girl, frightened, immediately rushed to assure him that this was not at all the case. Mom smiled and noticed that Alice often began to call her mother. She was happy when she first heard this from the girl. But today, Alice didn't have a single sign of life on her face. She had her favorite strawberry cake in front of her, but she didn't even touch it. This only convinced everyone even more. Alice was clearly worried about something, but Alice said it wasn't, and was surprised at how noticeable it was. Gareth asked anxiously what had happened. Ryan suggested that his sister tell him what was bothering her so much, and he promised to fix everything. Alice approached the Marquis de Roland, saying that she would like to discuss a reception for her birthday. The Marquis realized that his daughter was simply worried about this, so he just smiled calmly and said there was no need to worry. He added that they had already agreed on everything with His Majesty. Everything would be exactly as she wanted. On the day of the festival, the king will officially announce her engagement to Prince Link. Then Ryan, her older brother, announced that he was against the engagement. Ryan was the eldest son and second in command of the Order of the Holy Lance. Gareth asked what that meant, and if Ryan was really against their marriage. Ryan turned to his father, asking if he himself believed that Alice was worthy of becoming the prince's wife. Perhaps the questions should have been asked differently, Gareth thought. After all, we are talking about the queen of the entire country, and they were really interested in whether the father thought Alice was suitable for this role. The Marquis flared up, shouting at Ryan to shut up, and became truly angry. He stated that his opinion was nothing compared to the king's word, but still added that Alice was selfish and unworthy of the title of queen. Gareth was surprised. Ryan only came once a month, and every time he found a reason to reproach Alice. Shouldn't he be more gentle? What she heard could well have started a scandal. But Alice only smiled, and Gareth was sincerely amazed. He thought he was simply blind and didn't notice what was happening. The older brother was always sarcastic, and Alice used to hate him. But deep down, she knew he was right. She really wasn't cut out to be queen. No matter what it costs her, she will stop this engagement. We need to think it over carefully. The prince was also a victim of this marriage. He suffered, although he was not guilty of anything, and she only got what she deserved. This time, Alice will definitely retain her freedom. She will break with the royal family and become a good doctor. Gareth turned to Ryan, reminding him that he hadn't shown up for a long time, and that there was no point in ruining the relationship now. But Ryan said he was simply expressing his opinion. Gareth added that their little sister has really changed for the better recently. Ryan again stated that he didn't believe it, and his brother, now angry, replied that he didn't understand anything. Ryan said he saw her growing up, and now his brother claims Alice has suddenly become good. In that case, the sun should have risen in the west. He thought it was just empty talk and returned to his affairs in the order. Then the younger brother decided that Ryan should see for himself. If he saw how Alice had changed, maybe he would believe it. He approached Ryan and asked him if he had much to do and when he would be back. Ryan replied that he didn't know and that he might be late. The brother suggested that the Order of the Holy Lance was participating in the campaign on Krynn, and added that the Second Legion was responsible for this campaign. If the French Republic decides to enter the war, the Royal Order will certainly fight back. Ryan then asked Gareth to tidy himself up and look as good as he could. He must take care of the family and not allow their honor to be insulted. Gareth replied that Ryan was a grump and that he should look after himself. Ryan just smiled back and said they would see each other soon. Meanwhile, Alice was lying in bed and didn't know what to do. All because there was very little time left before the celebration, and she still hadn't figured out what to do. This whole situation arose a year ago, when she fell in love with Glinka at first sight, and then begged him to betroth them. But now she didn't know how to say that her feelings had changed, because he was a noble prince. If the engagement is announced, no one will be able to cancel it without ruining the reputation of the royal family. Then the maid came and said that she had brought tea. Alice was grateful and thanked her with a smile. The maid also asked Alice a question. She said that she didn't know why, but she could see that the lady was worried, and assured her that everything would definitely be fine. There had been no usual expression on Alice's face all day, so the maid was very worried. Alice just smiled back and stood up to hide her feelings. She noted that Mary had already grown a lot. Alice was grateful for the care and emphasized that she was doing just fine. The maid said that in that case she would go and wished her mistress good night. No matter how hard Alice tried, there was no other way out. She had only one option left: to attack from the front. She decided to talk to His Highness herself. Finally, they managed to see each other. Alice said that she needed her dresses, and she would choose something from the wardrobe. The maid was surprised, but Alice noticed that she had many such outfits. The maid smiled, because she knew that Alice preferred to order new dresses. Alice realized that she wore each dress only once, and it seemed wasteful. But to be honest, clothes are the last thing she cares about right now. Then the maid suggested going to the dressing room. She asked which dress the lady would like to wear from those presented. The maid showed several options, but Alice thought these dresses were too formal. An hour later, Alice had already apologized to Mary. They were unable to choose a dress. It turned out to be too difficult a task. When Alice was on Earth, she devoted herself entirely to her work and did not pay attention to beautiful clothes. She felt much more comfortable in her dressing gown and everyday clothes, and she didn't understand why she couldn't just get dressed and go to the king. It was impossible to appear in something simple. The challenge was to find something sophisticated, but not too conspicuous. After some time, Alice informed Mary that she had already chosen and decided what she would wear. The maid asked if the mistress was sure of her choice, and the girl also noted that she would like to ask for help with other preparations. Mary replied that of course, she would deliver everything as soon as possible. Alice smiled and said she was glad Mary was not delaying in getting ready. There are only 3 days left. The girl was sure that she would definitely succeed. She asked for help with makeup, because she didn't know how to do it herself. Today we'll do some light makeup. It will be even better. Alice thought it turned out to be a great, neat look. Mary noted that the lady looked great. Very beautiful, without excess, tasteful and very becoming. The father entered the room and asked if Alice was ready. He was very surprised to see how beautiful she was. Alice said that she was ready. She did not understand such a reaction from her father, believing that she was simply ugly. But her father said that it was not so, and the carriage was ready. It was time to go. Alice replied that she was already going down. After some time, they arrived and began to get out of the cart, hurrying to the meeting place. Alice came back here again. Although she never expected this to happen, she spent 6 years here, always remaining on the throne. At that time, she thought that the whole world revolved around her, and she hoped that the conversation with the king would go smoothly. The father turned to Alexei, suspecting that she was unwell, but Alice said that everything was fine. At least if she feels bad, she shouldn't hide it and immediately report it. She warned her father that if something happened, he shouldn't swear too much. He immediately asked if something had happened and said that if something did happen, they would solve it together. Alice didn't answer and explained that she just asked before she did anything. Even if the king gets angry, she intends to make things right. The cold of the operating room, the vital signs monitors, the dark red blood. The most important thing was to save the patient from the other world. Alice decided to call off the engagement and become a good doctor. Her father said that it was time for them to go, and she was very sorry to upset him, but it had to be done. She has already brought trouble upon herself, and now nothing can be changed. Alice was surprised when she saw Mr. Sashka. She came closer and began to greet the king. She introduced herself very formally. The gentleman said that there was no need to be so formal. He remembered her when she was very little, and now she is a real lady. Alice was very grateful and noticed that he told them to sit down and not to be shy. He offered the servant to bring them green tea. He missed her, hadn't seen Alice for a long time, so he invited her to the reception. He asked how Alice was, and she replied that she was fine. The king said that they should sit down quickly. Alice thought that she was still healing her, still very good feelings, but she was worried, because His Majesty was gradually getting weaker. He said when he was dying that she had to become a good ruler. With these words he passed away. Last time Alice couldn't fulfill his request. Today she needs to try again. However, around this time, the disease should have already manifested itself. Indeed, despite the warm smile, the king's eyes reflected painful fatigue. He was really in bad shape, despite the smile. Alice became interested in what illness he had, since the court physician was unable to make an accurate diagnosis. He only said that the blood stopped circulating normally. At the beginning of the illness, the king's body gave off the smell of ketones. His breathing was heavy, and he was physically exhausted. The cause was abnormally high blood acidity. Alice wondered what kind of disease could cause such symptoms, and if she could cure it, she would prevent the rebellion. The king noticed that Alice was behaving strangely today. She was more serious than usual. The girl smiled and was surprised. The father noted that it was true. This child had suddenly and unexpectedly grown up. It all started from that day, and now the whole family praises her. Alicia makes tea for Alice every day. The father added that this was true, and besides, this tea was very tasty. The king said that he was curious and would like to try Alice's tea too. Then Alice got a little scared. She said she was afraid her abilities were not worthy of His Majesty, but the king thought that was nonsense. Any tea she brought would be special. The girl agreed, because she believed that asking permission to show a secret should not be taken too seriously. She went into the kitchen and asked for help in making the Sun Dynasty's special black tea and white tea. She knew that His Highness's favorite tea was Sun Dynasty tea. Due to the different temperature and amount of water, the same tea could taste different. After some time, the tea was steeped, and she brought it to His Highness. He was very surprised to find that the tea had a deep aroma. He had once drunk tea prepared by the Qing Dynasty ambassador, and this drink reminded him very much of that. He said it was simply amazing, and asked when Alice had managed to learn the art of tea. He and Vita should learn from her, but Alice thought he was just flattering. The Marquis said she studied in secret, and every time he drank her tea, his tiredness seemed to disappear. It was great that the Marquis could enjoy this tea every day, and the king envied him. Then he turned to Alice and asked if she would brew the same tea for him every day after the wedding. He should reward her for such wonderful tea. He said that she could ask for anything, because they would rise soon. Alice realized that she had to say this earlier to prevent something irreparable from happening, and admitted that she really did have one request. She added that she actually should have said this earlier. At that moment, the princess came in and told her father that he was accidentally late. She couldn't believe her ears when she heard that voice. It was the prince. The king smiled when he saw his son. "This is Prince Link, son of the King of Apulia." Alice introduced herself to him, but he only remained silent in response. She turned away when she remembered how madly she used to love his eyes. Apart from his icy gaze, his delicate features, and indifferent tone charmed her greatly. In fact, it was not love, but a huge mistake. She used to say she missed me, but His Highness said that he did not tell her that he wanted tea. He said she was disturbing him while he was reading and demanded that she leave the room. He doesn't need her favor, he is only around her because of his father. Alice became very angry, considering this to be too much. She didn't understand why he was never happy to see her. She was determined to make him hers and would stop at nothing. Now she believes that this feeling was the reason for her mistake. Alice still understood that she was to blame for everything. She was too stupid. Now, looking at Link, she doesn't feel the same thrill. 30 years have passed. The king said that his son was late, and he was interested to know the reason. Link replied that he was delayed due to issues with the budget for the expedition to Crimea. Then the king admitted that the matter was truly important. War could not be avoided. Many citizens have died on the peninsula. This war needs to be won, and the king is interested in how things are going in the Republic. The Marquis reported that the Republic's military power was concentrated off the coast, but so far there were no active actions. They continued to discuss politics for a long time, and the girl thoughtfully realized that war was approaching. Before, she had been too carefree and did not attach much importance to this, but now everything seemed different. She remembered the failed expedition, which resulted in serious losses and the bitterness of defeat. This failure left a permanent mark on her soul and did not allow her to forget the terrible consequences. She remembered especially keenly that it was on that expedition that her brother Gareth died, and this loss was a heavy blow for her, from which she could not recover. The king noticed that everyone was so engrossed in discussing politics that they had completely forgotten Alice's presence, as if she had been overshadowed by their conversations and experiences. The girl replied that there was nothing wrong with that, because it was more important for her to listen and understand than to interfere in conversations where she felt like an outsider. Then the king asked Alice what she thought about all this, and asked her to express her opinion, hoping for sincerity and a fresh perspective. She admitted that she does not even dare to interfere in these complex issues, because she considers herself insufficiently competent and does not want to express uncertain judgments. The king clarified that he was interested in an independent and unbiased point of view, and not an opinion conditioned by political or personal interests. Alice wondered whether she should reveal the truth, because there was a risk that what she heard would frighten them and cause doubts in the future, violating the old foundations. She understood that perhaps someone would doubt it, but her brother's fate was truly inevitable, and it could not be ignored or hidden any longer. However, if she decides to be frank, she could possibly save many lives by warning of the coming dangers and preparing the kingdom for the trials. Therefore, despite her inexperience, the girl decided to gather her courage and openly express everything she thought, despite her fear and uncertainty. The king supported her, telling her to speak without fear and with complete sincerity, to hear the real truth, even if it was difficult to perceive. The girl highlighted two important aspects of the war that, in her opinion, should be given special attention and carefully analyzed before making decisions. The first aspect concerned the kingdom of Monstal, located on the eastern continent, which could play an unexpected role in future events. The king was surprised, and the girl emphasized that it was Monstal, despite his apparent neutrality, who could suddenly intervene in the conflict and change its course. Father explained that although Mansell was close to the peninsula, it was landlocked. Because of this, there was no point in him intervening directly in the war. They should only be concerned about the French Republic. He stressed that Mansell's interests do not intersect with their territory, and participation in the conflict is irrelevant for him. Therefore, it is worth focusing on the position of the French Republic in this war. The girl agreed with her father, admitting that they really had no compelling reason to intervene in the war. However, she noted that Count Clint was now in power, and the situation could become more complicated. She explained that if Count Clint wanted to strengthen his position, he would need recognition from the Republic of France, which could affect the balance of power in the region. Everyone present was shocked by Alice's words, and an unexpected silence fell. No one expected such a development of events and stopped talking for a while. The king noted that this was indeed unexpected, but such a possibility existed. He admitted that the situation could change in any direction. The girl added that Franz will not give up without a fight, and Mansell will help him in this fight, which makes the conflict more serious. She reported that Mansell's troops numbered about 20,000 soldiers, which already inspired respect and potential threat. The prince asked her if she thought that such a number of troops could pose a danger to their regiment. He reminded that their army is the strongest in the world, and only the troops of France and Frise can be compared to it, so the threat must be assessed carefully. The girl explained that she was talking specifically about an attack from the front, and not about other possible directions of attack. The prince expressed indignation, but admitted that the girl was well aware of the military situation and strategies. She suggested looking at the situation from a different angle, to take into account all possible risks and routes of invasion. The girl reminded him of Rick and the Gambling Ridge, emphasizing that the kingdom would not attack the peninsula from the front, given the natural obstacles. Instead, they will most likely follow the river through the mountain range. This is the only passage to the peninsula that is available to them. They intend to capture his territory, and if this happens, the troops will be cut off from reinforcements. As a result, the army will be trapped and will be routed by the enemy. This is true. If everything goes according to their plan, the troops will be surrounded with no chance of escape, turning into a real trap for the soldiers. He could not understand why he had not noticed this danger before, and immediately decided to send for the maid to convey an important message. He instructed the maid to tell the Prime Minister that it was necessary to contact the Minister of Defense as soon as possible tomorrow, and tell him about all the new information and plans. Although it is unknown whether the kingdom will enter the war, the Fox's words have caused them to prepare for anything. Link must contact the intelligence service to keep a close eye on Mansell's actions. The king wondered how Alice could have calculated the situation so subtly, understanding the complexity of international relations and the situation around the Crimean Peninsula. She was able not only to analyze the relations between the states, but also to accurately determine how the countries relate to the peninsula, which turned out to be very important. The king realized that he had greatly underestimated this amazing girl. She turned out to be much smarter and more perceptive than he expected. After these thoughts, the king turned to the marquise, interested in his views on the upbringing of such a daughter. He asked how she managed to raise such an excellent daughter who could look at the situation with such clarity and intelligence. Alice felt very embarrassed at these words, not being used to such frank compliments from her father. The father smiled, and the king turned to Alice again, as if he wanted to emphasize his respect and approval of her actions. He noticed that the girl asked to pay attention to two important things and decided to find out what exactly she meant. He became curious about what exactly she was talking about. When she explained that she was talking about an epidemic, he was surprised. The girl explained that the climate on the peninsula and around it is very different. It will be hot and humid during the expedition. She believed that it was necessary to carry out infection prevention, since diseases could destroy troops. Although the exact disease was unknown, it was important to prepare for everything. The king then agreed that the climate was indeed different, and the risk of infection was very high. He wanted to know how exactly they should prepare for these conditions. The girl replied that first it was necessary to develop a medicine, but even more importantly, to observe the rules of hygiene and cleanliness. This was the main thing for her in preparation. The king was surprised by this answer and asked again whether hygiene was really so important. The girl confirmed that it was. She said that the virus spreads faster in unsanitary conditions, and only careful attention to hygiene can stop its spread. In their time, the importance of hygiene was not yet understood, and the king was amazed by this discovery. It seemed to him unusual and important knowledge. He noted that this was really impressive, and he wondered where Alice got such information about hygiene and viruses in general. The girl recently became interested in medicine and has already managed to read several books on this topic, which aroused her great interest and desire to study this complex subject in more depth. She suspected that she might have accidentally said something unnecessary that could be misunderstood or raise doubts among listeners. If we can reduce the casualties and then bring everything back, then this will be a wonderful result that will benefit many. He noted that they would definitely think seriously about her words and take the necessary measures, given the importance of the proposed ideas. The king also emphasized that if everything he heard really turns out to be useful, the girl will definitely be rewarded for her military services in Apulia. The Imperial Cross is the highest award, which automatically confers the title of Honorary Knight, being a symbol of great honor and recognition. It could be said that this was one of the most prestigious awards among the aristocracy, and the girl felt that it was too high an honor for her to simply express her thoughts. However, the king did not agree with her modesty, and noted that if her opinion seemed immature, no one would rush to award the medal. But if her proposal helps stop the war, then this order will seem like a small reward compared to the price of peace. The girl was filled with delight and inspiration, feeling that her words could really change the course of events. She prepared a small gift for him, which she took great care of, to support him in this difficult moment and to show her care and attention. He was surprised and puzzled to hear about the gift, so he became interested in what exactly she meant and why she decided to make such a gesture. The girl explained that she had brought incense from the Empire for her son, special aromas that she knew would help him relieve fatigue and find peace. She made a sincere effort to choose something useful and thought about hearing about his constant fatigue because it reminded her of something familiar. Her suspicions were confirmed because the signs of fatigue and weakness seemed very similar to symptoms that she had once encountered before. She asked if he felt weak in the morning, if sometimes he didn't want to drink, and after drinking, he felt very thirsty again, trying to understand his condition. She also asked him if he woke up at night because he needed water, and he confirmed that he did, wondering how she could know such details. Now she understood why they hadn't been able to cure him earlier when he fell into a coma. His disease was widespread, but difficult to recognize in time. She was ready to accept treatment and understood that the main thing was to start on time so that the disease did not have time to progress and did not bring new complications. His Majesty suffered from diabetes. The disease progressed due to improper treatment. The blood sugar level was constantly rising, and when it exceeded 1,000, an acidosis coma began. When acidosis set in, none of the empire's medical methods could help. The girl said that she had recently studied a book that described symptoms very similar to his condition. She couldn't remember the exact name of the disease, but the book said that sugar is an important component of the body. When there is too much of it, symptoms similar to those observed in the king appear. The gentleman asked if they were talking about Anton's pig, since the girl seemed to be talking about it. The girl replied that she would be very grateful if he took her words into account and did not ignore them. The Viscount, being an experienced doctor, listened to the symptoms and immediately understood. It was diabetes, a disease in the development stage, which would soon fully manifest itself. After that, there was a completely different issue to discuss with him: the upcoming wedding with Prince Link. The girl admitted that she actually wanted to talk to His Majesty about one important matter that was bothering her greatly. She hinted that she could ask him for anything. He had to be ready to listen to her. The girl explained that she has to speak openly about what she feels and wants, despite all the difficulties of the situation. She eventually asked him to reconsider the agreement regarding her marriage to Prince Link, which caused no small amount of surprise among everyone present. Everyone was in complete shock, not knowing how to react to the unexpected statement, because it violated the usual order of things. Alice's father asked her in bewilderment what kind of nonsense she was talking and why she decided to do this. The king also expressed his incomprehension, seeing no point in reconsidering a marriage with a prince that had already been approved. The girl said that she wanted to cancel their wedding, and this statement came as a surprise to everyone. Her words left everyone confused, because no one expected such a turn of events. Her father immediately began shouting at her loudly, demanding an explanation as to why she had suddenly decided to talk about this. His voice was harsh, full of anger and misunderstanding. He noted that marriage was a serious matter, not a game, and warned that decisions should not be changed so easily. But the king intervened, asking her to wait, because he wanted to talk to the girl himself. The king asked Alice again if she realized how serious and important her decision was. He wanted to make sure that she understood all the consequences of her words. Alice confirmed that she really understood what she was saying, and that she was very sorry that everything had turned out this way. She deeply regretted what had happened and her decision. She admitted that her refusal was an insult to the honor of the royal family, and was ready to accept any punishment for such an act. It was an honor for her to answer for her words. The king was surprised and said that he did not understand her behavior, because she herself was so persistent in her desire to become Link's wife, and even asked to come to him. He couldn't understand what could have changed in her feelings if she now said that she simply considered herself unworthy of the throne and did not want to become a princess. The girl thought a lot and came to the conclusion that, being still inexperienced and unintelligent, she could not become a worthy princess, especially the mother of an empire, which requires responsibility. She thought for a long time and realized that the status of a princess brings fame and wealth, but to become a real first lady, you need to win the love of the people. And she doubted this. She understood that, being so simple and inexperienced, she could only become a burden to the empire, and not its support. So she prefers to abandon this path. True, the role of a doctor suits her better. A quiet life, without risks and doubts. In her youth, she did not act recklessly, and now she asks to forgive her for this unreasonableness and punish her for her words. Her desire to get the throne made her cause a lot of trouble for the royal family and him personally. She was ready to accept any punishment for her actions, understanding the price of her ambitions. He was probably feeling very angry right now, although he didn't show it openly. His mood was clearly tense because of what had happened. The king asked Alice to raise her head, as if he wanted to lift her spirits despite the gravity of the moment. There was a slight softness in his voice that unsettled the girl. He was smiling, and it made her reaction unclear. She couldn't understand how to answer him or what to feel at that moment. The king explained that he saw nothing wrong with her words, and that he, too, was worried about whether she would be able to become a good ruler. Alice noted that he was right. She was not yet ready to bear such a title, and was not confident in her abilities on the throne. But he noted that after today's conversation, all his doubts disappeared. The girl managed to arouse real admiration in him. This surprised her. He said that she should be more fair to herself, and that she would be a great partner for the crown prince. This is really important and wonderful. Frightened, the girl said that she was not suitable for the role of a princess, that she lacked dignity and strength of character. She considered herself too selfish, and her character was difficult. Sometimes it left much to be desired. The king said that this was quite enough for him, and asked how old she was, to see how young and inexperienced she was. Alice replied that she was only 16 years old, and the king remarked that this was a very wonderful age, full of hope and opportunity. He understood that she was afraid of the future. After all, with her new status, she would have a huge responsibility, and it was unbearably difficult. But who in this world is perfect? The main thing is to understand what to do to become better, no matter what. If she asks for advice, he will say that it is enough to behave as she does today, and then, in time, she will become a beautiful princess and empress. The girl was sure that everything should be different, and she did not think that the situation with her wedding should develop exactly as others had planned. Her heart demanded a different path. She was confused and didn't know what to do. The decision to cancel the wedding seemed like the only way out, especially considering that this day was decisive and her fate was changing forever. Inwardly, she thought she could admit that she didn't like Link, but she knew it was better to tell the truth than to hide her true feelings for the sake of other people's expectations. Finally, the girl decided to open up and say that she had a good reason why she wanted to call off the wedding, and this reason was deeper than just dislike for the groom. His reaction was completely unexpected. He was surprised and did not immediately understand what exactly she was talking about, because such a decision seemed impossible and inexplicable to him. The girl sighed heavily and said that her true desire was to become a doctor, to dedicate her life to medicine and helping people, and not to follow the path that was chosen for her in advance. The father, hearing this, was in complete shock. For him, it seemed stupid and an incomprehensible whim. He could not believe that his daughter wanted to give up marriage for such an unusual purpose. But she firmly stated her intention and insistently repeated that she wanted to become a doctor, that for her it was more than just a dream. It was a calling and the meaning of life. The Marquis, observing her behavior, boasted that his daughter seemed obedient. But deep down, this was only a temporary lull before a strong protest that was yet to flare up. The king, listening attentively, asked whether Alice was really sincere in her words, and whether she really wanted to devote herself to medicine, or whether all this was just a whim and a trick. Even though the king had sympathy for her, he was a strict man and would not tolerate lies or deception, so the girl firmly said that she was telling only the truth. She repeated that everything she said was real feelings and a deep desire that came from the soul itself, and not just a casual statement. It was her sincere desire, and she really wanted to go down this path, understanding the seriousness of her decision and the consequences. The girl dreamed of feeling a cold scalpel in her hands, so that she could save lives, be useful, and influence the destinies of other people with her art. She wanted to feel the pulse and energy of a living organism, to help people, to restore their health and joy, making the world around them brighter and happier. The king noted that the medical profession is one of the most difficult and requires enormous dedication, and perhaps she will not be able to withstand the trials that await her. But Alice was confident and said that she perfectly understood all the difficulties and complexities. She was ready for this and considered her calling very important. The king understood well that such a path for the girl was practically impossible in the conditions and circumstances prescribed to him, but he listened to her with respect. However, he noted that he could not even imagine that the girl would have such thoughts and desires that would radically change her fate and family plans. He asked about a bet, and the girl immediately showed a keen interest in the idea, although she herself was not sure how profitable it would be for her. He admitted that the bet would not really be profitable for her, but he still decided to offer it to test her determination and drive towards her goal. Then, Alice had questions. She became interested in how exactly the bets would take place and who would take part in them. because the very essence of the bet remained a mystery to her. He turned to the Marquis and asked if Alice had ever told him about her plans and intentions, trying to understand how serious the girl was in her words. The man replied that he was hearing about this for the first time and had never heard anything like it from Alice, which somewhat surprised those gathered in the room. Then the king turned to Alice with a direct question. Does she know what exactly doctors do and how difficult this profession really is? It was noted that the work of a doctor is not as simple as it might seem at first glance and requires enormous responsibility and knowledge. But Alice confidently said that she knows very well how difficult this profession is, and she is the person who is able to cope with these tasks. She said that she carefully studies books and gradually understands better the meaning and importance of medicine in people's lives. The king noted that the girl seemed to be serious, and that her knowledge and interest truly came from deep study of the subject. He reminded that Alice belongs to the House of Marquises, and the laws of the empire do not prohibit women from becoming doctors, which opens up wide opportunities for her. Elisa gave the example of Vika's daughter, Mrs. Elena, who became a successful doctor and proved that a woman can succeed in this field. The king decided to ask the question differently and asked if she really thought she could become a doctor and cope with all the difficulties along the way. The king noted that in order to become a doctor in the empire, the girl would have to pass exams at the medical academy, where her title would play no role at all. There they will not look at origin or title, but only at knowledge and skills that will need to be demonstrated during strict tests. In the empire, the professions of doctors, politicians, and lawyers are considered the most noble and respected, on par with noble titles. Imperial doctors hold a high social status, comparable to those on Earth, and the field is considered highly competitive and demanding. What the king probably meant was that he was wondering if the girl could become a real doctor without the support of her title in the face of tough competition. Therefore, when the girl firmly stated that the decision was final and she wanted to help people, the king listened carefully to her position. He said that she would be engaged according to the decision, and she could not disobey this order, because it was the will of the family and the empire. The girl understood this perfectly well and could not contradict him, so she decided to ask him for understanding and time. The king thought about it, because he did not want to force her to do something that she sincerely did not want, valuing her will and opinion. She was his favorite niece, and he treasured this very much, wanting a real family bond to be strengthened between them. He decided to give her time so that she could prove her worth and ability to become a doctor without the help of a title. If she succeeds and becomes a doctor, she will become much more useful than just a princess. Then he will stop insisting on their marriage and change his demands on her. This was his condition. If she failed, she would have to obey his command and marry. Her options were limited, and she knew she was risking losing her freedom. The girl asked how much time she had to study, but he made it clear. She needed to become a doctor before she came of age, and he didn't intend to wait any longer. She had only 6 months left, and he hoped that she would quickly give in and quietly agree to become the prince's wife, without further resistance. But now she is not yet a doctor. She faces the task of successfully passing the most important exam, which will determine her future destiny and freedom of choice. It is almost impossible to become an outstanding doctor in 6 months, but the girl is grateful for the attention and chance that His Highness gave him. She was determined that she would achieve her goal and would not allow fate to force her to give in or concede without a fight. The king was amazed by such determination. He also believed that saving people was a noble cause, but he understood that many were not able to withstand such a burden. After all, she grew up in an aristocratic family, and she couldn't afford to carry such a burden and responsibility without breaking down. After some time, the king turned to Alice, noticing that she had not seen the prince for a long time, and believed that they had much to discuss and understand. However, the girl replied that everything was fine with her, and there was no reason to worry. She felt confident and ready for any challenge. The king ordered Prince Link to take Alice for a walk in the garden, as he had important matters to discuss with the Marquise. The walk was supposed to help them concentrate and prepare for the conversation. Link responded that he understood the reason, and offered Alice his arm so that they could walk together. He confidently led her, showing that he was ready for the upcoming dialogue. Alice felt a slight fear and confusion, despite her holiness, but still carefully placed her hand on the prince's outstretched hand, trying not to show her excitement. She felt very awkward, because many years had passed since they had separated. Their breakup was very difficult and far from peaceful, leaving deep wounds in her soul. Link had once sentenced Alice to death, and she believed she deserved it. The prince asked if anything was bothering her now, observing her condition. But Alice replied that she was not really worried. She was just thinking about the past, and that Link had also experienced and suffered a lot because of the events of those years. He did not feel love for her, but was forced to marry out of duty. Most likely, this circumstance did not bring him joy and did not make him a happy person. If Link married the one he truly loved, it might make him truly happy and ease the burden of his royal duties. The prince then turned to Alice and asked her if she had anything she wanted to tell him, giving her the opportunity to speak openly and without fear. Alice thought that if she had something important to say, she would have done it without hesitation. But at that moment, memories of the past simply came to her mind, and she decided to remain silent. The princess apologized to him, expressing her sincere regret for what had happened. Her voice was soft, and it was clear that she truly felt responsible for the situation. However, he could not understand what exactly she meant and what she was asking for forgiveness for. It seemed a mystery to him, and he remained in the dark about the reasons for her words. She explained that she was sorry for all the troubles she had gone through over the years, and for the difficulties she may have brought into his life. The girl also recalled that as a child, she often bothered him with her whims and demands, which was not always easy to bear. Stubborn and narcissistic, she engineered a marriage he never agreed to, a decision that only complicated their relationship. He asked who could have advised her to take such a step and how she could have decided to do it without his consent. The girl was confused by his questions, and he, seeing her confusion, repeated the question, trying to understand who was the source of these rumors about the wedding. Recently, Marquis Child began to behave unusually, which caused concern among those around him and forced them to keep a closer eye on his actions. His frequent meetings with the third prince became a topic of conversation, and they began to be watched with great attention so as not to miss any important details. In addition, he asked not to make too much of a fuss about the Marquis, and the Marquis himself expressed a desire to apologize for Alice's behavior and admitted that he had not kept an eye on the situation. The king, on the contrary, noted that Alice had shown herself to be at her best that day, and the course of her thoughts had been a pleasant and unexpected surprise for him. For a moment, he thought of Taylor's and how she had done the same thing her mother had done. It was like an old story repeating itself, almost like a reflection of the past that could never be forgotten. Taylor's announced that she was leaving home to become a nurse. She decided to make a real scandal, as if to show everyone how much she resembled her mother, and it was obvious even to the naked eye. Since he had made a bet with her, he felt obligated to send her to the hospital. He knew that in a few days she would give in on her own and make the decision that circumstances were forcing her to make. They began to discuss which hospital to send her to. This question became important, because her future and future life depended on the choice of the institution, and they wanted to do everything as correctly as possible. Market immediately realized that the Roland family had their own hospital. It was something special, a place that symbolized status and provided the necessary conditions for education and treatment. It was Taylor Hospital, and he decided that that was where she would go to study. It seemed logical, because that was where she would get the best education and support. Alice was confused and did not know what to answer him. She understood that he did not feel hostility towards her, but at the same time, she felt guilty for what had happened, as if she was carrying a heavy burden inside herself. She was sure that she was responsible for this silent conflict and did not want to become a burden to him. There was anxiety in her soul, and she tried not to harm their relationship. She also realized that she had insisted on her own way before, without considering his feelings. Now she realized that she had been too stubborn, and her words could cause pain that she had not even thought about. Now she was apologizing again, trying to right the wrongs of the past. Her regret was sincere, and she hoped that it would help restore trust and bring back the old harmony between them. She saw Link turn around abruptly and couldn't figure out the reason for his sudden action. It was unexpected and disconcerting, leaving her confused and with unanswered questions. From this moment on, their destinies will no longer intersect, and she sincerely hopes that each of them will be able to find their true happiness and find inner peace. She also wishes that the prince would finally achieve what he has long dreamed of and strived for with all his heart. After all, once in the past, it was she who became the cause of his suffering and the difficult trials that he had to endure. The brother was completely horrified and did not hide his irritation, saying that she already had enough scandals, and now she decided to turn the hospital upside down, even though she had no understanding of medicine. The city has already noticed that if Alice wants to play doctor, then her brother is happy to become her patient and support all her ideas. The mother was simply shocked and could not find words to express her attitude to what was happening, remaining in complete shock. At first, it seemed like it was just a temporary infatuation that would quickly pass like a summer wind, leaving behind a light memory. But Alice, turning to her brother, showed interest, asking when he was going to work, hinting at her future plans. Her wish was simple: for him to take her to the library of Apulia, where she could immerse herself in the study of the knowledge she needed. Then the brother noted that he could take her there, but he would not be able to take her back early, because before her visit to the hospital, she had a week to get acquainted with the local medicine. The level of knowledge she had was quite consistent with the requirements for medical education. This gave her confidence that she would be able to successfully continue her education and practice. Now she finally had to go to the hospital, where she could apply the knowledge she had acquired in practice and get acquainted with real medicine, and not just the theory from books. Arriving at the library, she chose a huge number of books that seemed useful and interesting to her for further study and deepening her knowledge of medicine. It was surprising that the level of medicine in this place was so high. Antibiotics and anesthetics were already used, which greatly facilitated treatment and operations. Perhaps such an amazing level of medicine became possible thanks to one person, the alchemist Fleming, who made a huge contribution to the development of medical science. Most likely, this alchemist also came from Earth, and if he had found himself in the same conditions, he could have received at least 20 Nobel Prizes for his discoveries in the field of medicine. However, despite these advances, the study of Lucard remained underdeveloped, although it could be used to prevent cardiac arrhythmia, an area where there have been no major advances. This medicine was good at reducing swelling, and some anti-inflammatory drugs were very effective in combating inflammation and alleviating the condition of patients. Alice continued to study hard, but when Gareth found out that she was spending time in the library, he was simply in complete shock, not expecting that she was so serious about her studies. The knight reported that she had been sitting at her books since early morning and had not eaten at all. They called her several times, but she did not respond and did not leave the room. This behavior caused concern to everyone around her. The young man got angry, thinking that it was time to take a break and have a snack. Without waiting any longer, he hurried to Alice to make sure that she was okay and to help her distract herself. Alice didn't immediately understand the reason for his excitement. The guy was trying to find out if she had seen what time it was, hoping that this would help her tear herself away from her books. The girl looked at her watch and was surprised that time had flown by so quickly. She hadn't noticed how the day had passed. She was so absorbed in reading and studying the material. He asked her if she understood anything from these difficult books, to which Alice replied that she was trying to understand what she had read, although it was not that easy. She really found it a bit difficult and would rather skim through the pages trying to get the gist of it, but she couldn't always get into the details because of the amount of information. The guy looked closely at her notes and realized that they were indeed professionally written, with the technical precision and accuracy typical of medical records. However, the handwriting was uneven and careless, which clearly indicated that the notes belonged to Alice. It was her handwriting that was so recognizable. Although she had studied medicine in Tana, it seemed incredible that she could handle such a volume of knowledge on her own and master the professional terms so quickly. Maybe his little sister really was a genius, because he said it was time for them to do these things. He noticed something special about her that made her different from other children. She asked if she could continue her studies another day, if she couldn't devote enough time today. Her voice was polite and careful. The brother was surprised by such a proposal and did not expect that she would show such interest and persistence in her studies. It was a real surprise for him. The father was also amazed and asked how to get there, because he knew that Alice went to the library almost every day without outside help. The brother noticed that she did not want to return home and that he had to literally drag her out of there by force every day so that she did not stay too long. He also believed that Alice worked too much and was overtired, as she clearly did not rest or take proper care of herself. But Alice, smiling, replied that this was not at all the case and that she felt quite normal, despite all the difficulties and stress. The father was surprised and asked how this could be, because she looked very weak and fragile, unable to withstand such a rhythm. Alice thought that before going to the hospital, it was worth thoroughly preparing and acquiring all the necessary knowledge for future work. Cramming was the usual way of learning on Earth, and it required a lot of effort. To become a doctor, you had to work hard, read a lot, and repeat the material over and over again, sparing no time or effort. Alice decided to go not to the Imperial Cross Hospital, as was usually the case, but to Taylor's Hospital. This choice in itself spoke of her desire to follow her own path, despite all the difficulties and doubts of those around her. Although this hospital belonged to their family, it did not have the atmosphere that they were used to in the Empire. The environment was far from ideal, and Alice had to face the bitter truth and trials of life very early on. His own feelings about the place were complicated, and he didn't want her to go there. So he decided to at least talk to her, express his doubts, and try to understand how ready she really was for such a choice. He asked her if she really didn't want to get married so much that she was ready to take such a serious step for the sake of her dream. His words were like an attempt to understand her true motives and strength of determination. If that was the case, then she needed to participate in her bet so that he could appeal to His Majesty to ease the pressure and understand the situation. It was a way to show that she was serious about her intentions. Alice replied that everything was not as he thought, and she really wanted to become a doctor. Her words were sincere and firm. She was confident in her choice and dream, despite all the difficulties. She explained that it was her cherished dream to help people and study medicine. She was going to do everything she could to prove that she could overcome any difficulty that came her way. Alice was ready to do everything possible to achieve her goal. She knew that only through persistence and dedication can one become a real doctor, and she was ready to fight for it to the end. He reminded her that she was the daughter of Viscount Cicate, and if anyone found out that she was from the Roland line, they would immediately start giving her preferential treatment. This could prevent her from gaining real knowledge and truly learning, becoming a real expert. In this world, it so happened that she was born into a blue-blooded family, although her origins were unclear and mysterious to everyone around her. The father addressed Alice, warning that in no case should she be proud of her status and position, despite her pedigree and position in society. The girl smiled calmly in response, assuring him that she would indeed take his words to heart and follow this advice. This day fell on the 28th day of the 5th month of the year 283, according to the imperial calendar, exactly 2 days after the moment that changed a lot. This date later became important in the history of medicine because it was on this day that the girl went to the hospital, starting a path that would influence the future. The doctor didn't understand why he needed to deal with a useless 16-year-old girl, and he couldn't understand who had given her the right to appear in the hospital in the first place. Graham was the eldest son of Baron Byron, worked at the Tyler's Hospital, and was considered the youngest and most talented professor, one of the best doctors. They agreed to meet at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, and if she was even a minute late, he would immediately take her out of the office without further ado. His determination was obvious, but the girl showed up right on time, which he immediately noticed. At the same time, he noted to himself that this meeting was their first, and he did not yet know what to expect from her. She gave her name as Laura and thought that he was the one Kate had sent to talk to. There was a slight hesitation in her voice, but she tried to sound confident. He introduced himself and immediately asked if she had decided to connect her life with medicine. He noted that she was beautiful and that people would probably ask her many questions. He knew these aristocratic children well, not accustomed to work and superficial, and he did not understand what they could talk about with her at all, because she was too far from their world. He assumed that Laura looked too young and most likely had not yet graduated from medical school. Saving people from death is far from child's play, and it requires a serious approach. The girl admitted that she did not study at the academy and did not have an official medical education, which surprised him somewhat. He decided that she had no knowledge of medicine, but when she said that she had studied on her own, he could not help but laugh, and allowed himself to be ironic. Even if the Rowland family supported her, he thought that it was not worth being so self-confident without proper experience and education. If it weren't for the personal request and intervention of the committee, he would have kicked her out long ago and asked if she even understood what it meant to be a doctor and what that profession included. The girl confidently answered that she knew that healing was methods of treating patients and caring for them, but how deeply she understood this remained a question. Then she said that she wanted to ask her something else that had long interested her, and she was waiting for the moment to ask this question. He asked her if she had ever seen people die, trying to understand how familiar she was with this difficult and painful side of life. The girl admitted that she really had encountered such a moment and saw death with her own eyes, which left a deep mark on her soul. He said that doctors often encounter similar situations, and he wondered what she would do if she encountered a seriously ill patient. She replied that she would keep the memory of such a patient deep in her heart, as if she were burying the departed there forever. This surprised him, and he wondered if she knew the real meaning of these words and realized their full depth and importance. He explained that doctors have a phrase, "bury the dead in the heart," that means that the loss of the patient remains in memory in order to avoid mistakes in the future. She, trying to explain herself, admitted that she had not previously thought about the true meaning of these words and did not understand all the suffering associated with them. Since she was asked, he decided to give her a job, realizing that she might not be able to withstand it and would not last long in this field. He was determined that this was where she should go, that it would be better for her and for the cause. Of course, it won't be easy for her, but the sooner she leaves, the more chances she has to find herself and overcome difficulties. It became clear to him that it was time to leave, and he asked her to follow him. He did not linger, but quickly led her after him, as if leading her to something important and inevitable. She walked quietly, trying to understand what lay ahead. He explained what she would be doing, and then showed her the place where she would be working. It was a small but well-equipped room, with all the necessary equipment and furniture already in place. Everything was ready for her first shift and new duties. He said that the patient before them was a homeless woman who had been ill for a long time. There were many such patients here, and most of them suffered so severely that healing seemed almost impossible. The doctor admitted that in reality there is almost no point in treating such patients, but they follow the instructions of the Marchioness Taylors of the Rowland family and show care until the very end, leaving no one without attention and support. All the expenses for the hospital's operation were covered by the Rowland family. They wanted her to perceive her work as a salvation, an opportunity to help people, despite the hopelessness of the situation and the complexity of the patient's illness. In general, her job was to take care of these patients. But exactly what she was supposed to do, she couldn't immediately figure out. Everything seemed vague and new, and she felt unsure. She was confused and did not know whether to try to carry out a full treatment or to wait, observe, and use a cautious tactic so as not to harm the patients in their fragile state. It was a key question because watchful waiting meant moderate treatment with minimal risk. He didn't understand why she had asked that question because no one usually asked that. He explained that with a wait-and-see approach, it is necessary to constantly monitor the bed sores so that they do not develop, because there is no point in performing operations if the situation does not worsen. The girl said that she understood this approach, but she knew that bed sores could lead to necrosis, and this would be dangerous, because the tissue would begin to die. In this case, she would very much like to perform surgery to prevent necrosis and preserve the patient's health, preventing problems from developing further. He was surprised by her decision. He did not understand whether she knew how to properly perform necrotomy and cope with such complications without mistakes. He noted that she was already doing everything possible to prevent bed sores from developing, but she shouldn't pretend that she knows absolutely everything. It's dangerous. He also asked her to speak up if she felt tired, because he didn't want to wait until she couldn't cope with the work. Alice said that she would put all her efforts and endurance into achieving results and not letting down either her patients or her colleagues. She had a fighting spirit, which seemed surprising, but he understood that she would not last that long, and in a couple of days her strength might run out. Professor Graham was beginning to think that she was not suited for such a difficult job, as she lacked the experience and stamina to handle the constant workload. That's probably why he brought her here, so that she could realize her own capabilities and perhaps decide to give up this profession. She understood perfectly well what it meant to treat such patients. It required not only knowledge, but also patience and the ability to cope with difficult cases when human life was at stake. She had treated even more complicated cases before, and her first surgery, unfortunately, ended in death. However, she was determined not to give up and get a license to become a real doctor. Her main goal was to officially obtain the status of a doctor so that she would be allowed to take exams at the academy. To do this, she first had to undergo training and earn good reviews from the professor and the hospital. Time was limited, only 6 months to achieve the desired result. She knew that she had to quickly secure the hospital's support and not give in to the bet made with the Highness. Without wasting a minute, she decided to get to work right away to show her determination and professionalism in a matter that was so important to her. The maids were surprised by her desire not only to help with cleaning, but also to personally take care of the patient's hygiene, which was unusual for a girl from a wealthy family. Elisa explained that the sanitary and hygienic conditions in the ward left much to be desired, and that was why patients did not recover for a long time. Only 2 people were currently responsible for the condition of the ward. She introduced herself, but this caused a murmur, since it was clear from her appearance that she was from a wealthy family, and students were not usually allowed to do such duties together with maids. Cleaning and bathing the sick were considered their direct responsibility, and no one around them ever interfered with this process, leaving this dirty but important work exclusively on their shoulders. When asked why they weren't doing this, they replied that they didn't know, and the girl herself promised that she would do everything herself and take on the matter. After some time, she had completely cleaned the room, doing a job no one had ever expected of her. Most of the professionals ignored the most important part of care, sanitary standards and the basic needs of patients, focusing only on treatment and forgetting about basic hygiene. Even though it was dirty and thankless work, she didn't complain and washed everything thoroughly, showing real diligence. The maids, seeing that the mistress was taking on the cleaning herself, were simply amazed and could not believe their eyes. They came closer and politely asked to be allowed to take on this work, since it was, after all, their direct responsibility. However, for the sake of her patients, she decided to do the cleaning herself, not wanting to hand over this work to anyone, despite its low prestige. The maids were so surprised that they did not hide their shock that the miss took on such work with her own hands. They asked to be allowed to help and take on the cleaning, because that is what they were trained to do. But the girl showed persistence, cleaning on her own for the comfort and safety of her patients. Even then, she said that she was grateful to everyone who offered her help, but she preferred to do everything on her own. Over time, the premises remained clean and tidy, which earned the respect and approval of everyone around. Everyone was delighted with the result, and the patients expressed sincere gratitude for the care and attention that the girl showed. She decided to start treatment and carefully asked each patient what exactly was bothering them, in order to understand where to start and how best to help their condition. The girl then quickly asked for a scalpel, explaining that she urgently needed to treat the bedsore to prevent further deterioration of the condition. She needed a scalpel to remove necrosis, dead tissue, and she understood that there could be a lot of blood, so she asked to prepare a sufficient amount of gauze in advance. The maids were amazed and confused. They did not expect that she would dare to perform the operation with only a scalpel, without any additional help or instruments. The girl firmly stated that this was the instrument she was going to work with, and that she would not need any other devices now. All the necessary supplies were quickly brought to her, and she was sure that Professor Graham would not object to such a small procedure, because it was not dangerous. However, if the bedsore is left untreated, an inflammatory process will begin, which can develop into a serious complication, sepsis, which threatens the patient's life. The maid was genuinely surprised by the girl's determination to carry out the operation seriously, since many considered it too risky a step. The girl took the scalpel in her hands and, despite slight excitement, was focused and ready to get to work. When she became a surgeon, she had always been told about the importance of confident and careful hand movements during operations, and these words rang especially meaningful now. Although she was now a princess, she felt like a doctor first and foremost, and she understood that this profession would remain with her for the rest of her life, no matter what. The maids were genuinely surprised by the girl's skill. None of them expected her to handle a scalpel so skillfully. Her movements were precise and confident, as if she had acquired real professionalism over the years of training. Many doctors do not have such skill in handling a scalpel because it requires not only knowledge, but also a steady hand, calmness, and a lot of experience. The girl stood out from the others, and those around her immediately noticed it. She reported that the rupture was sutured successfully, and the patient felt noticeable relief after the operation. His condition really improved, which confirmed the correctness and accuracy of the procedure. The girl also insisted that the maids watch the patients more closely and, if necessary, immediately call her so that she could intervene in time and help with complications. Alice apologized for disturbing her and asked if the maids could help her with the treatment of the remaining patients, since their experience and attentiveness were very important in this matter. The maids willingly agreed to help, promising to carefully follow all instructions and support the girl in her treatment, since working together significantly accelerated the recovery process of patients. A week later, the professor came and asked if a man had been looking for him. The question aroused his interest, because he wanted to understand what was going on with this girl. He started telling me that he had heard about this girl that someone was interested in and wondered if she was still working at the same place, since she had previously been considered promising. The professor had even forgotten about her, but memories of her skill and hard work surfaced again, causing a slight nostalgia and interest in what had become of her. His curiosity was connected with the question of whether the girl had run away, whether she had given up her job, because sometimes people leave when they encounter difficulties. The man the professor was talking about did not understand why he was not answering his questions, as he assumed that the girl was continuing her studies under the professor's guidance and had not left this place. Graham explained that the girl was self-teaching, and this was precisely why the man was so irritated, feeling that the process was not going as he expected and required more control. The man declared that she was not at all like the girl she had asked the Viscountess to send, and his words sounded with obvious displeasure, as if he had expected a completely different result. Graham expressed regret about what happened, but the man replied that he was now obliged to return and do everything at the highest level, without leaving the slightest shortcomings or mistakes. Graham apologized and admitted that he only had 2 hands and little time left for self-improvement, so he did not have time to devote enough attention to the learning process. If this girl was really that important, then the man believed that he should have personally taken charge of her training, taken full control of the situation in order to achieve the desired result. He admitted that he didn't even know if she was alive now, or if she had perhaps already run away, leaving everything behind, and this added to his anxiety and uncertainty. When the man entered the room, he did not immediately understand whether he had come to the right place, because the surroundings were too clean and tidy, which seemed unusual for this place. Just a week ago, there was a completely different order here. Everything was different, but now the atmosphere seemed much brighter and more cheerful, which surprised him. His surprise increased when he saw the very girl he was looking for. She was there, and this sudden appearance made him think. He noticed that she was sitting in a chair and dozing, as if she was tired and resting, and at that moment, a quiet, almost homely atmosphere hung in the room. He noticed that she was still there and was very surprised. He had not expected such a development of events. He felt a sense of confusion, because he did not think that her presence would last for so long. He tried to address her, but the girl immediately said that if the doctor decided to wake her up, it was not worth doing. She explained that yesterday the patient was too weak and could not even speak, despite all the care of the medical staff. She had just fallen asleep, so it was better to wait until she woke up. The girl advised to come back later, so as not to disturb her rest, and not to interfere with her recovery from a difficult condition and prolonged stress. The lady was said to be an amazingly beautiful person, so much so that even the maids in the house highly valued her and admired her strength and dignity, which showed itself even in the most difficult situations. The professor, who was considered experienced, was amazed and could not understand what exactly everyone was talking about. It was unexpected for him. He did not expect such recognition and such a scale of admiration directed towards her. In addition, it turned out that she performed surgery. She fought for the patient's life all night, saving him from death. This was striking in its determination and skill, because she demonstrated real strength and dedication. It was bold and even reckless. He admitted that he had failed to keep an eye on a seriously ill patient, but he also did not understand how it was possible to perform an operation based only on books he had read and not on experience. It seemed almost impossible to him. He was sure that she couldn't do anything. A real quality operation could only harm the patient, and he had to check what exactly she did and what the outcome of her intervention was. He decided that he needed to teach her a lesson so that in the future she would not allow herself to act so daringly and risk the health of patients without proper preparation and permission. But at that moment, Alice suddenly opened her eyes, and all his confidence was shaken. Her awakening changed the whole situation and forced him to look at the situation differently. The body was indeed very weak and exhausted. Alice was very exhausted after the operation. She needed to regain her strength as soon as possible to cope with further tasks and prevent the patient's condition from worsening. The professor approached Alice, examined her carefully, and asked what manipulations she had performed on the patient in order to understand how successful the operation had been and whether any serious complications had arisen. Alice replied that she had performed a marginal resection, surgical removal of the damaged part of the tissue, trying to preserve as many healthy cells as possible, which was especially important in such a difficult condition of the patient. The professor asked her what she would do if complications arose after the operation, and Alice admitted that the condition of the wound was so bad that she did not even have time to think about possible problems. She needed to act quickly. It turned out that the professor was a very responsible person who would never leave a student in a difficult situation. He closely monitored the progress of the operation and was ready to help with advice or support at any time. He decided to check the patient's condition himself after the intervention, but when he examined the wound, he was simply amazed by what he saw. The results exceeded all expectations, and this caused him genuine surprise. The professor saw that the wound was clean, without purulent discharge, and had even begun to be covered with new tissue. The patient suffered from a serious bedsore, and it was unclear from which side to approach the treatment, but Alice coped with the task brilliantly. The professor asked who helped Alice during the operation, but the maid replied that the mistress had handled everything herself, showing real strength and skill in such a difficult situation. He was amazed and could not understand why exactly the bandage was placed on this place. It remained a mystery to him because he did not expect that such a simple detail could have such significance and cause him such surprise. She had to explain everything in detail, but he still couldn't figure out who exactly did it. He was sure that the girl couldn't have handled it herself and that someone else had helped her, but who remained unknown. He insisted that she confess who taught her and who was her mentor, because it was important for him to understand where she got such skills from and who was behind this process. But the maid intervened and said that the doctor must remember that no one had come here for the last week, and no one was in sight who could help. He then asked her if she thought he would believe such an explanation, and he became very angry because he felt as if they were trying to deceive him or underestimate his intelligence. The girl was completely confused and did not know what to answer him, since the situation had developed unexpectedly, and she did not expect such a reaction from him. The doctor approached His Highness with a question as to whether fatigue had become less frequent recently, trying to understand how things were going with his condition. His Highness replied that, as before, after the attacks, nothing changes again, and the fatigue continues to return with the same force. The doctor apologized for the inconvenience, and the gentleman said that he could not blame him, because this was a situation that was difficult to change or correct. He added that if the doctor cannot help, then none of the doctors in the entire empire can cope with this problem, because doctors are not omnipotent, and there is a limit to their capabilities. Link tried to explain to the doctor that one cannot make a diagnosis as a fact without proper analysis and confirmation, that the case requires a careful and cautious approach. He insisted on a more thorough study of the situation. The doctor expressed regret, but said that the servant had already done everything she could, and further measures were impossible without new data and examinations, transferring responsibility for the patient's condition. Link remembered Alice's words from the previous day and thought about them, trying to figure out how they could be related to his current condition and why she mentioned these symptoms back then. When the father heard the symptoms described, he assumed that there might be too high a concentration of sugar in the blood, which made him anxious and led him to think about serious illnesses. The doctor admitted that he had not encountered such a disease before, and these symptoms were new to him, which made him think and look for possible explanations. He recalled that recently an article about blood sugar had been published in the French Republic, which described symptoms reminiscent of those observed in His Highness. The doctor suggested that it might be diabetes and apologized for being so blunt, but noted that it was necessary to urgently begin appropriate treatment and examination to confirm the diagnosis. He asked for the name of the general physician who made this discovery because he was surprised and wanted to know more about the man who made such a contribution to medicine. The doctor was interested in this specialist because very few people knew about the disease, and he wanted to understand who exactly was behind this new information. He said that only recently an article was published in France, and in their country, the diagnosis is known to less than 20 people, which made the situation even more mysterious and unusual. Link was stunned, and the doctor insisted that the scientist's name be revealed so that they could contact and exchange knowledge to better understand the disease. However, His Highness said that the name was not so important. The main thing was to begin treatment and study of the disease, without wasting time on formalities, and to focus on action. They were left aside when the king's voice was heard. The situation seemed tense, and the atmosphere filled with anxiety as everyone waited for important news from the monarch, who usually had everything under control. The doctor explained that he understood a lot of things now, but he was asking for a little time to sort out the situation. His words sounded confident, although it was clear that there was still a lot of work ahead and unknown details that required attention. He could not understand at all why the king did not share all the information. Undoubtedly, His Majesty was aware of the current level of imperial medicine and had fresh data that could help in the treatment, but why he was silent remained a mystery. Of the other doctors he knew, several worked at the Imperial Hospital of the Crosses, a place where the best specialists served. He knew for sure that one of them had to be involved in the case, but the details remained vague. There have already been discussions about the specializations of this hospital, but no one has been able to accurately determine His Majesty's illness. Perhaps the diagnosis was made by doctors from another medical institution, because they had different approaches and methods. Then he remembered Taylor's Hospital, where there was a distinguished doctor known for his competence. The head of this institution was a specialist in diabetes and might know something important about the monarch's condition. A young genius named Graham should also be aware. It was necessary to gather information about him because the mysterious disease was still a secret, and no one knew the exact methods of treatment that could help. If this doctor could cope with such a task, then he was truly talented and brilliant. But who exactly he was remained unclear, and the search for this person became an increasingly urgent need. Alice's conclusion seemed to be correct, and now the Crown Prince hoped that this time the king's illness would be overcome. He believed that her knowledge could be the key to salvation. After that, Link turned to his father to understand why he hid the truth. He didn't understand why he would hide the fact that Alice was the one doing the healing if her help was really helpful. The king explained that he considered it unnecessary for the future princess to delve so deeply into medicine. Instead, he sent her to the hospital, hoping that she would quickly tire and return to her duties at court. He believed that a doctor, although a respectable title, was not suitable for a girl destined to become an empress. His plan was to distract her so that she would eventually forget about the treatment and return to her position. Link, however, could not share this opinion. He coldly noted that he was now part of the imperial family, and his wishes did not matter, as if to imply that such talk was outdated and inappropriate. The king did not understand why his son insisted so much. Link's stubbornness seemed pointless to him, and he saw no reason why he was so clinging to Alice's role in what was happening. He then changed the subject, asking how the military campaign in Crimea was going. The prince replied that the Second Legion had already advanced and, by his estimates, would arrive in a few days. Then the king remembered Alice's prediction about the possible threat. He asked how things were with the Monsel kingdom, because according to the girl, they were the ones who could start sudden military actions. The prince was just about to voice his suspicions when it turned out that the secret ambassador of the Republic, Franz, had already been to the kingdom of Monsel more than once, which could not be a simple coincidence. This made him wary. The king was shocked. It seemed incredible to him that the enemy ambassador was freely crossing the borders. The prince said that he had already spoken with intelligence, and it became clear that Monsel was preparing something serious, possibly an attack. If they hadn't paid attention to what was happening, the country would have suffered huge losses. Fortunately, Alice noticed the danger in time, and her observation could have saved hundreds of lives. The girl really turned out to be extraordinary. Without a doubt, she is worthy of becoming a princess. Now one thing is important: to get her out of the hospital as quickly as possible, where she is still. The king turned to Link, offering him a little distraction from his troubled thoughts. Perhaps a change of scenery would do him good, as the tension was growing with each passing day. Link replied that he himself had been planning a trip to Hayden. The coincidence seemed convenient, and he decided that it was not worth delaying. The trip would provide a respite. However, it was decided that instead of Hayden, he would be better off heading to Fair. Important events were happening there, and the presence of the crown prince could play a role. Fair is where Taylor's hospital is located. He was asked to visit Alice, as she had played an important role in the recent discovery. It would also allow him to discuss her future. The professor was puzzled and decided to ask Alice how exactly she managed to achieve the result. She calmly replied that she simply followed the instructions without adding anything. He asked again with doubt whether everything had really been done according to the rules. The girl again confirmed that she had not deviated from the instructions one step. In any country, medicine is considered the highest value. Therefore, only the best pass exams, and the passing score is incredibly high, especially in the context of the royal program. Despite the fact that she had read many books, the girl understood that simply reading was not enough. Real skills come through practice, and she began to doubt. Did she do something wrong this time? But he, on the contrary, said that everything had turned out right. The fox suddenly cheered up, because now he had to personally examine the patients, and therefore she had hope for recognition. He thought for a moment, because he had almost forgotten. He was assigned to look after this girl. Sometimes she seemed too stubborn, but he saw in her a sincere desire for the cause. After a long and intense work, he decided that it was enough for today. He promised that they would continue everything tomorrow, because both the girl and he needed a little rest. Then he suddenly announced that he was going to personally teach her. This was a great surprise for her, because she had not expected such attention from a respected mentor. From that moment on, he accepted her as his student. Now there was a bond between them, that of a teacher and a student. Together they would work and observe whether she could be trusted and whether she was really telling the truth. In response to his decision, the girl could not contain her joy and smiled sincerely. This was a sign for her. Everything was not in vain, and her efforts were finally appreciated by someone. She felt immense gratitude to her mentor. The next day, they were already examining patients together, trying to notice even the smallest details that might have escaped the eye. The patient suffered a loss of consciousness due to extreme pain. The cause turned out to be a severe case of bacterial pneumonia, and it became a major learning moment. The professor, looking at her with a slight mockery, asked why she had ruled out pleural effusion, as if checking whether she really understood what she was talking about and was not just repeating something she had memorized. Alice calmly explained that everything was connected with the thick, purulent sputum that was found in him, and in such cases, it often indicates a completely different disease. In addition, during the examination, she noticed areas of hardening in the lung tissue, so she assumed that in this case, an abscess was more likely than a pleural effusion. She answered confidently and precisely, as if she were back at her annual practice, where she worked diligently under the supervision of a strict but fair professor. The thought that very soon she would be able to become a real doctor and help patients filled her with excitement and gave her the strength to move forward. Every time she thought about it, everything inside her began to vibrate, because the professor still did not understand who was standing in front of him. Despite the fact that he deliberately asked increasingly difficult questions, she answered them calmly each time, as if she knew the answers in advance. The professor could not believe that she could have such rich practical experience, because outwardly she seemed too young and naive. But even if she doesn't have much experience in this world, there are still real phenomena around that inspire her to develop. Among such figures, she especially admired the alchemist Flamine and Count Grinchen, who were considered true geniuses of medicine, worthy of imitation. Laura couldn't be who she was thought to be. The name was just a cover, carefully chosen and used to mask the real identity she kept hidden from everyone around her. After class, the girl, not knowing what to do next, turned to her teacher with a question. There was excitement in her voice, because everything that was happening seemed new and unusual to her. The teacher looked at her with a slight smile and said that was enough for today. They had done well. He suggested that she take a rest, because she had been trying hard all day. When the girl was about to leave, he suddenly stopped her. It sounded serious enough, so she turned around and asked in surprise what had happened. The man looked at her a little confused and said that he wanted to apologize. The girl didn't immediately understand what was going on, because she didn't remember him doing anything wrong. She only asked him if he was apologizing for being unfair to her in the first place. He nodded, noting that perhaps he had been biased and had made her uncomfortable. He also admitted that he judges people by their appearance too often, and this time he was wrong. For this, he asked for forgiveness, because he knew that he was wrong from the very beginning. The girl just sighed and said that she was already used to such things. There were plenty of refusals. After all, not every doctor would bother with the homeless people that she was now caring for. She knew how hard it was to get respect when patients were living on the streets. Almost no doctors took such people seriously, and she always did the best she could. And suddenly, he said that from now on, he would like to work together. His voice was confident, and there was not a shadow of doubt in these words. He really was proposing this. The girl felt joy, even a little excitement, and without thinking, she extended her hand to him. It was an unexpected but pleasant end to their conversation. She said she was willing to try her best. She wanted him to be her mentor, to share his knowledge, because now they were allies. Alice asked if everything was going smoothly in the hospital. Her voice was calm, but with obvious concern. She wanted to make sure that the girl was not having any difficulties and that she really liked the atmosphere around her. She replied that she was very pleased with what was happening. She looked genuinely happy, and her father did not hide his surprise, because he expected that being in such a place would tire her much more. However, Elisa confidently stated that she was not tired at all, and on the contrary, she really liked it here. It was obvious that she felt in her place and received sincere satisfaction from her work. The father only sighed heavily. Deep down, he hoped that his daughter would quickly get tired of the local conditions and ask to go home, but that had not happened yet. It was surprising that before at home, Alice would not have lifted a finger, but here she enthusiastically performed physically difficult work. The people at the hospital even dared to let her clean the wards. If it weren't for Alice's intervention, he would have immediately ordered them all to be thrown out without any investigation. This stubborn grandee entrusted Alice with caring for the homeless, which in itself seemed crazy. Her father could not believe that she was not only capable of it, but also enjoyed it. The professor looked at Alice and asked if she wanted to go to practice at the rescue station tomorrow, a difficult place, but important for her training. He didn't wait for an answer and informed her that she was heading there tomorrow. The rescue station was open to students and interns, and now it was her turn. The rescue station resembled a ground-based emergency room. Only those in need of urgent medical attention were brought here. It was a place where lives were saved from the brink. In such conditions, it was much more reasonable to teach her, to help people, and gain experience at the same time. It is much more useful than sitting at books without real practice. Here you could immediately understand how she would behave in a real crisis. Real situations reveal character better than any exams and lectures. When her father found out about this, he was shocked. But the girl only replied with a smile that she considered this a great opportunity to show herself. He couldn't believe that his beloved daughter was being sent to a rescue station. He was especially angry that Graham had arranged all this, and he seriously considered firing him. However, she assured him that everything was under control, and there was no need to worry. Everything was going according to plan, and she was completely confident in herself. The father sighed heavily, lying in his chair, and admitted that she really liked it. He realized that there was no way to stop her. Then, he said that if anyone even tried to harm her, they should immediately report it to him. He would not leave it unpunished. Alice nodded, saying that everything was fine. And he added, "Especially keep an eye on Graham. He is under special surveillance." The next morning, she showed up at the station, formally introduced herself, and stated that from that day on, she would be doing her internship, asking for guidance and direction. Everyone in the room froze in surprise. No one expected to see such a girl here, and certainly not as an intern. They decided that the lady had simply mixed up the station, thinking that she had come to the wrong place. But she calmly replied that she knew where she was, and had come here, and not by mistake, as everyone had thought at first. Then she was asked who her mentor was. In response, Graham, a professor with a confident posture, stepped out of the crowd and without hesitation declared that he was her teacher, causing surprise among everyone present. Those present did not hide their shock when they realized that Professor Byron himself was standing before them. No one expected to see him in such a place, and especially accompanied by a young girl. The professor calmly approached one of the young employees and informed her that the girl would be doing an internship there. His confidence left no room for objections. She will be under his supervision most of the time, but if he is not there, then another guy from the team will have to take care of her. It seemed unthinkable to them that this fragile girl was actually going to do an internship here. Everyone was stunned that she seriously decided to work with them. She looked too fragile, almost childish, and no one was sure that she would be able to withstand everything that they had to deal with here. She looked like she was about to faint at the mere sight of blood, as if even a drop would make her collapse to the floor. One of them immediately noted that she was definitely of aristocratic descent. Her manners, posture, and even her gaze betrayed her noble origins. He remembered her name right away, as if it sounded special. And for her, it was unexpectedly pleasant. Too pleasant not to notice. He took her around the department, showed her where the wounded were cared for, explained where the IV supplies were, and pointed out other important details of the daily work. Professors are not around students all day long. They have a lot to do. So when a new patient is brought in, the interns first examine him themselves, make a preliminary diagnosis, and only then call the professor for confirmation. The doctor, who is on shift at the moment, is considered responsible for the patient. This is how their work process is organized: quickly, clearly, and harmoniously, without unnecessary conversations, in order to save time and save as many people as possible. On the ground, everything works according to the same scheme. These surgical instruments are used when there is no time to wait for transportation, and the operation must be carried out right on the scene of the incident in order to save the victim. He assured her that once the next patient arrived, he would personally teach her how to use these instruments. This promise was a real gift for her. It was a chance to gain important practical experience. The girl couldn't hide her delight. She smiled so brightly and sincerely that he even felt a little embarrassed, unexpectedly looking away. He had just started to tell her about other tools that were used in emergencies, but at that moment, they were urgently called away. There was no time to continue the explanation. Hearing the noise, the girl was the first to shout that a new patient had arrived. Her voice was sharp and excited. There was tension in it, as if she had momentarily forgotten that she was just studying. He briefly said that they needed to hurry, because this was a chance to undergo a public internship right now, in real conditions, next to real doctors and real lives. He ran into the room and immediately saw a man screaming loudly in pain. The situation was serious, and delay could cost the patient his life. The man groaned in pain, clutching his chest and gasping for air as if someone was squeezing him from the inside. His face turned white, sweat appeared on his forehead, and his breathing became hoarse and intermittent. The patient, breathing heavily, leaned against the wall and asked for everything he needed to be brought. He could not stand up straight, and every movement caused him pain. It seemed that any delay would only worsen his condition. Alice watched him and immediately understood. The problem was not in the heart. Everything looked different. She had seen these symptoms before. The way he holds his chest, the way he breathes. The heart has nothing to do with it. She was overcome with despair. The man was getting worse with every minute, and she didn't know what to do. In this state, he might not live until the professor arrived, and time was passing too quickly. One of the students begged the gentleman not to lose consciousness. He tried to keep the patient conscious, knowing that the teacher would soon be here. That was the only hope left. Alice, realizing the urgency of the situation, apologized and said that she had to borrow someone else's stethoscope. There was simply no time for the ceremony of politeness. The guy was so shocked by her words that he asked her again if he had heard right. He did not expect such actions from her, especially at such a moment when everything looked serious. Without waiting for an answer, Alice called out sharply to those around her, demanding a stethoscope. Her voice sounded sharp and commanding. Now only the patient's life was important. There was no time, and the student was confused. She grabbed the stethoscope herself. A human life was at stake. To hesitate meant exposing the patient to even greater danger. After listening to the chest, Alice immediately recognized the signs. It was pneumothorax. The sound of breathing disappeared on one side, and everything became crystal clear. She knew that her left lung was damaged, and it was no longer possible to breathe through it. But something else was even more worrying. Not only was the lung out of order, the situation was much more dangerous. It turned out to be a tension pneumothorax. The accumulated air was compressing the organs. The gas in the pleural cavity began to compress the heart, and this could cause severe shock. If she didn't try, he could die. So she immediately asked to bring antiseptic and a syringe so she could help. Time was running out, and the situation required immediate intervention. Otherwise, everything could end badly. They quickly brought her the largest syringe they had available. Its size immediately seemed impressive, but there was no choice. It had to be used to administer the medicine quickly and effectively. Andrusha calmly asked what exactly she was going to do, to understand how he should behave. He tried to understand what was happening, but the situation was tense, and there could be no answer to this question without action. Alice confidently said that he just needed to remain still and immediately began the procedure. She took responsibility and did everything necessary to help, despite the anxiety around her. The needle didn't reach the required depth, and it had to be inserted deeper so that the medicine would get to where it was really needed. It was unpleasant, but there was no other option. This was the only way to save the situation. The guy was completely horrified, not understanding why all this was being done. He felt fear and misunderstanding because what was happening seemed strange and frightening to him, but he trusted her because there was no other way out. After a while, he was finally able to breathe freely, and relief was visible on everyone's faces. It was a significant and welcome change, indicating that her actions had indeed helped. She apologized to the professor, explaining that the situation was critical and required immediate intervention. Such a step was necessary, and there was simply no time for doubts in order to save life. So she made the decision on her own, without waiting for permission, because there was too much at stake. It was a risky choice, but the only right one at that moment. At that moment, the professor burst into the room, immediately asking where the patient was. His face expressed anxiety and tension. The situation was clearly serious and required his presence. He asked how things were and what was going on, trying to understand the scale of the problem and assess what had been done and what still needed to be done. The room was tense with uncertainty. Noticing that the procedure had already been completed, the professor immediately asked what exactly had happened in order to assess the seriousness of the condition and understand what further measures should be taken for the patient. He turned to Hansen, who was supposed to be Alice's teacher, and monitor her actions in this situation. His attention was focused on understanding who exactly was responsible for what happened. Hansen replied that it was not him, and then the professor remotely asked who had inserted the syringe. This question made everyone present look closely at the details of what had happened. The whole group turned their attention to Alice, and she immediately fell silent, as if realizing that all eyes were now riveted on her, and that much depended on her answer. The professor assumed that it was Alice who carried out this procedure, based on what he saw and heard, which led everyone to expect her explanation. The girl admitted that it was indeed her, and explained that it all happened because she diagnosed a tension pneumothorax in a patient. Due to the rapid filling of the lungs with gas, it was necessary to urgently use a syringe to prevent the patient's condition from worsening. The professor then realized that the diagnosis was accurate. It was a tension pneumothorax, and assessed that the procedure was performed correctly and on time. Tension pneumothorax can be fatal in minutes, and thanks to Alice's intervention, the patient's life was saved. Hansen thought about it, because the professor had never praised anyone before, and here seconds were at stake. This made him realize the seriousness and significance of what he had done. She immediately realized that she had a tension pneumothorax. The girl noted that she listened carefully to the patient's breathing, and then, using a stethoscope, she was able to accurately determine the diagnosis: pneumothorax. It was almost unbelievable, because the Count and Greenhand in their works described exactly this situation in great detail and accurately, coinciding with her conclusions. Graham thought about it, because it was surprising that in such a difficult situation, it was this child who was able to make such an adequate and accurate conclusion. Perhaps her knowledge is significantly superior to that of her peers, but if this had not been confirmed, she would hardly have been able to assess the situation so quickly and correctly. After several months of practice in the hospital, this seemed incredible, because for many, simply piercing a patient's chest with a needle is a very serious and dangerous matter, and it is difficult to believe in such courage. Having learned about this, Graham thought for a long time and came to the conclusion that in one word she could be described exclusively as brilliant. But not just brilliant, truly amazing and stunning genius, whose abilities seem to overshadow all surrounding talents. As the eldest son of his family, he has put in a lot of effort and gone through many trials to reach the position he currently occupies. He dedicated his life to science, striving to bring glory to his family and become a great physician like Greenhand and Flaming. His main goal is to achieve recognition and leave his mark on medicine. But he wasn't gifted. He was just a man who worked hard and did his best. In contrast, Alice stood out, incredibly talented and goal-oriented. She was small and fragile, but her abilities amazed everyone. No one could predict what great discoveries were still waiting for her in the future, and how impressive her path would be. Alice would definitely join the ranks of great scientists like Greenhand and Flaming. The professor saw in her potential that he himself could only dream of, and believed in her outstanding future. He had great hope that she would be able to achieve incredible heights, change medicine, and become someone who would inspire others with her talent and perseverance. Today, he decided to give up his usual glass of wine, a symbol of a small pause, and hope that everything will work out for him and Alice as planned. No one could believe that such a young girl dared to do what others were afraid to even try. It caused respect and surprise at the same time. Everyone around her constantly talked about her, admired her success and perseverance. Alice became a topic of conversation, a role model, and a source of inspiration. People gossiped about her achievements and couldn't believe that she had achieved so much at such a young age. She was both admired and amazed. Besides everything else, she was also considered very beautiful, which added to her additional attractiveness and further fueled the interest of those around her. But Alice herself saw herself differently. In her eyes, she was an ordinary intern who was just trying to learn and do her job, without understanding the full significance of what was happening. She couldn't completely ignore other patients, because they also needed help and attention. Despite the fact that her thoughts often returned to important matters, she always found time for everyone who needed her care. Alice always gave the impression of being an incredibly kind and polite girl. Her manners and warm attitude towards others made people feel comfortable and confident around her, which made her truly special. In addition to being kind, Alice was very talented and capable in everything she did. Many thought that Hansen could not remain indifferent to her charm and professionalism, as if his feelings for her were real. However, Hansen insisted that there was nothing like that between them. Richard, noticing the way Hansen was looking at Alice, decided that he should be the first to confess his feelings, showing the determination that the other lacked. This irritated Hansen, who said in his heart that if he didn't like it, it meant he really had feelings. This behavior was quite strange, but his friends realized that he really cared about the girl. Another guy, observing the situation, suggested Hansen not to be afraid to confess, so as not to regret later that he missed his chance. He believed that honesty is the best way in relationships and in life. However, Hansen was sure that nothing would come of it. He doubted himself and was afraid that his feelings would not be mutual, so he preferred not to make the first move and to stay away. There was a time when Hansen believed that he was a person who would definitely be rejected. These thoughts often prevented him from believing in himself and allowed doubts to take over his mind. Then, the other guy started to think that maybe he and Hansen really weren't right for each other. This realization forced him to look at the situation from a different perspective and make some tough decisions. He admitted that at first he just liked Alice's appearance, but then, when he saw her talent and character, he realized that no one could resist her and her strength of spirit. It was very sad to realize that despite all the feelings, they would never be together. This thought left bitterness and regret that were difficult to overcome. The servant, observing what was happening, asked whether the investigation had been completed successfully and whether there was any new information that could influence the situation. The gentleman strictly warned Rand to speak more quietly and not to attract unnecessary attention, so as not to complicate the situation and not to reveal their intentions to outsiders. The servant quickly apologized for his words, realizing that he had said too much and had crossed boundaries. He wanted to show respect, but realized that he should not delve into such topics without permission. The mastery that His Highness possesses evokes genuine admiration from all who see him in action. His intelligence and dexterity amaze even the most experienced people around him. It is impossible to recognize him in such a guise. Only the true heir of the empire is capable of so skillfully hiding his identity and appearance, remaining unnoticed by prying eyes. Recently, the gentleman has been feeling unwell, and this is causing concern to everyone around him. He himself says that this is a strange and unpleasant condition that is difficult to get rid of. He thought that the reason was insomnia and constant weakness, which prevented him from fully performing his duties and living a normal life. Then the gentleman confessed that since that very day 15 years ago, he could no longer sleep peacefully, as if something was constantly bothering him at night. Nightmares haunt him in his sleep, not allowing him to relax and forget about the difficult past that still echoes in his soul. The servant suggested that the master see a doctor, believing that professional help could improve his condition and relieve tension. However, the gentleman explained that he was already taking medication as prescribed by the doctor, and the situation seemed to be under control, although it did not bring the desired relief. However, the medications do not provide much effect, and it may be worth undergoing a re-examination to find out the real cause of the health problems. But the gentleman rejected this idea, believing that he did not need additional medical assistance and was able to cope with it himself. He told Rand that he would handle it himself, not wanting to share his feelings with anyone and continuing to keep everything under control. The servant was disappointed, but he knew he couldn't change the situation. He resigned himself to it because decisions were made higher up, and he had little control over the matter. The heir was not an ordinary person, and the servant decided to clarify whether the prince really wanted what was offered to him. He was interested in the true will of the young man, because decisions could have serious consequences. The crown prince's father had made it clear that he intended for the prince to visit Alice. This was an important condition and could not be refused, since it was a matter of family plans. His engagement with Alice never took place, despite all the expectations and talk. There remained a gap between them that was not bridged, although future commitments were still hanging in the air. The father, who ruled a huge empire, was unwavering and decisive. If he decided that the prince should be engaged to Alice, then there was no point in arguing with such a man. It was done despite any doubts. The heir argued with Alice, trying to prove that they had little time, and all this was just a manifestation of concern, nothing more. He understood that it was impossible to win this argument, and their conversations remained fruitless. In fact, the heir didn't care who he was with, although he didn't want to show it openly. Alice irritated him, but formal duties remained in first place, and he didn't like that either. The servant carefully asked what exactly the master wanted. He wanted to understand what was required of him and how to proceed, because all decisions were important for the correct course of events. If the master did not wish to continue, the servant suggested that they return, so as not to waste time and not to create unnecessary complications. This was an attempt to avoid conflict and ease the situation. However, the gentleman confirmed that everything was in order, and the servant immediately invited him to go further. The carriage was already waiting for them, and they needed to hurry so as not to delay the planned actions. They might make a little noise and mess around a little, but no one was particularly worried. After all, he always held himself confidently and knew how to handle such situations, even if they suddenly attacked him. After all, he was used to always being on the alert and quickly solving problems, so there was no doubt that he would be able to get out of any trouble without much loss or extra effort. Of course, no one could compare to the power of Highness Link, who had become famous as a war hero and angel just a couple of years ago, earning respect and fear among his enemies. Then they encountered a drug addict who shamelessly demanded that they hand over all their valuables, threatening and trying to intimidate them with his madness and aggression. Princip immediately noticed that any drugs were strictly prohibited in the Empire, and therefore did not expect to meet such a person here, in a quiet place. They decided that they needed to sort this situation out, but first, it was important to get the drug addict to the department for investigation and further action. The drug addict became enraged when he saw them and began to behave even more aggressively, waving his arms and screaming as if he was going to attack. The princess's servant sternly ordered him to put down the knife, warning him that otherwise he himself would suffer greatly and would not be able to escape punishment. The man began to swing the knife even harder, repeating in the morning that everyone should stay away and not come near him. His behavior was aggressive and nervous, as if he was really prepared for danger. The knight decided that the situation required immediate intervention, and he himself had to deal with this man, because threats and a knife in his hands could not go unnoticed. There were no other options. He decisively knocked the knife out of the man's hand, who immediately began to shout for no one to come closer, continuing to frighten everyone with his behavior and pretending that he was ready to fight to the end. The prince sighed with obvious irritation and weariness, because it was unpleasant and difficult for him to watch this whole scene. He did not want to be a witness to this drama at all. The knight loudly announced that he had grabbed the man, trying to show that the situation was under control and the danger would soon be eliminated. He had no intention of letting his opponent go. The prince asked the knight to remain calm and not to rush, to avoid unnecessary risks. He tried to smooth over the passions and bring order to what was happening. Suddenly, the knight felt a sharp pain in his chest. The man unexpectedly shot him with a revolver, piercing his body. It was a shock to everyone around. No one expected such a turn of events. The knight was scared at first, not understanding what to do next, because the wound was serious, and the pistol looked like an extremely unexpected weapon for this man. He couldn't understand where the man got the revolver from and how he was able to get it so quickly, because no one expected this man to be so armed. The man himself explained that he shot because he threatened to kill the knight and believed that this was the only way to defend himself, not allowing anyone to approach him. He then pointed the gun at the prince and declared that he too must die, expressing extreme aggression and the intention to leave no witnesses. The wounded knight, despite the pain, tried to protect his prince by any means necessary, wanting to save him even at the cost of his own life. He suddenly jumped on the attacker and struck him straight in the throat with his sword, trying to stop the threat once and for all. After this, the master hurried to run up to his knight, Realizing the seriousness of the wounds and trying to help him, the knight admitted that he did not know about the revolver the attacker had, and sincerely asked for forgiveness for his inattention, realizing that this was what cost him the wound. The prince lifted the wounded knight into his arms and told him that he must gather all his strength to survive and continue to fight for his life. The bullet hit the spleen, one of the most vulnerable areas, and this significantly complicated the wounded man's condition, threatening his life. The knight said that he was glad to walk hand in hand with the prince at that moment. He was deeply grateful for their common destiny and support in difficult times. He sincerely hoped that his master would live a long and happy life, full of health and well-being, despite the current situation. This hope was like a light in the darkness for him, which did not allow him to give up. The prince insistently asked not to lose his presence of mind and to watch the pulse carefully. He understood that there was a pulse now, although the patient had passed out, and he believed that this was a temporary condition, not the end. He had very little strength left, but he could not let his comrade die. Despite his fatigue and weakness, he fought, trying to maintain life, even when it seemed that the chances were almost zero. The nearest imperial hospitals were very far away, and it was simply impossible to get to them in time. The only option was the nearby tailor's, but even that did not inspire confidence, given the patient's critical condition. Meanwhile, Alice turned to the teacher and reported that the patient who had a dislocation was already okay and began to feel better. Her confidence indicated that she had been able to help quickly and effectively. The teacher became interested in how exactly she acted to achieve such a result, and asked her to tell in detail about the methods used and the sequence of actions. Alice explained in detail what she had done, describing each step so that the teacher could understand her thought process and approach to treatment. She was confident in her method and was willing to share her experience. The teacher commended her performance and said that she had done a very good job, confirming that her skills and knowledge were of a high standard. Alice used the Coker method to manage her shoulder dislocation, a method that is well known and effective. The teacher was not surprised that she used it, because it is the classic approach in this situation. But with each passing day, it seemed to him more and more that Alice was not just an experienced scientist, but someone with an innate talent as a doctor. It was beyond his comprehension how one could act so confidently without having an official title of healer. He thought there was something special about her, like a natural-born doctor, and it didn't fit into his knowledge at all. After all, she wasn't a healer by status, but her skills exceeded many expectations. The teacher asked if Alice was tired from the hard work and suggested that she take a little rest, considering that the emotional and physical stress could be affecting her condition. The girl replied that she did not feel tired and was ready to continue, but the teacher noted that it would be better for her to rest a little in order to save her strength and avoid making mistakes in the future. Alice thanked him for the care and attention he had shown her. This gratitude touched the teacher, and for a moment he felt awkward, which manifested itself in slight embarrassment. He himself did not understand what caused such a reaction, because it was impossible to react like that to a student, but timidity appeared in his eyes, and his face turned slightly red, which further betrayed his emotions. Alice noticed that something was wrong with the teachers. One of them was clearly not feeling well, but at the same time, he assured that there was no need to worry and everything was under control. Her attention was drawn to his condition, although he tried to hide his weakness. Suddenly, he was urgently called. There was a noise and shouting all around. They said that the patient was about to regain consciousness, and the situation was growing tense. Everyone was rushing to prepare for the key moment that was supposed to happen at the end of the scene. Alice felt more like an observer than a spouse, and the professor, who was present nearby, looked visibly worried and even a little frightened by the upcoming outcome. The mood became tense and anxious. A knight sent by His Highness appeared on the scene. As fate would have it, the bullet hit the very area where the vital organ was located. The situation looked extremely serious. Unfortunately, it was in this square that the spleen was located, which significantly complicated the wounded man's situation. Doctors understood that damage to this organ was life-threatening and required immediate intervention. His Highness inquired carefully about the knight's condition and resolutely declared that it was simply necessary to save him no matter what. It was clear that much was at stake, and there could be no compromise. Alice had a strange feeling, as if she had seen this young man somewhere before. His face, movements, and look were familiar to her, but she could not remember exactly where she had met him before. She decided to take another look at him to understand where she got this feeling of déjà vu from, and why this guy attracted her attention more than others. At that moment, he noticed her gaze and responded with a barely noticeable movement, as if he realized that Alice was watching him and was not trying to hide her interest. He was of slight build, but seemed energetic enough, which gave the impression of an unusual combination of strength and fragility at the same time. This did not seem to be the typical condition of the patient. Alice's gaze caught something unusual in him, emotions that she had not seen in him before, as if he was hiding inner strength under a mask of calm and fatigue. The press once again insisted on whether the doctors could really save the victim, asking the question that hung in the air and worried everyone without exception. The professor replied that it was extremely difficult to give a definitive answer. The situation was complex, and much depended on further actions and luck in the operating room. The prince insistently demanded clarity and precision in the answer, emphasizing that without saving this man, there was no way to do it, and it was important to be as frank as possible. After he was told all the details and nuances, the prince became slightly angry. He understood that time was short and the risk was high, and the doctors were required to exert maximum effort and determination. Suddenly, he took out a pendant, which caused a real shock in the professor. The symbol on it was so familiar that it was impossible to doubt its meaning. The pendant was decorated with the royal coat of arms of the Romanov family. This instantly changed the perception of the situation and made it clear that the matter concerned not just a patient, but a person of high birth. The prince firmly stated that the price did not matter, and that every effort must be made to save this man, regardless of any difficulties or dangers. Even if he was incorrigible, such a serious wound in the family could not be healed by anyone. It was a deep trauma that would hardly ever heal without serious intervention. Graham admitted that he was very sorry, but Alice interrupted him, saying that they would do everything possible and that she understood perfectly. Her determination suddenly changed the course of the conversation. The professor was very surprised to hear these words from Alice. He did not expect such optimism and courage from her in such a difficult situation. He asked how much she knew, because the bullet hit her right in the spleen, and it was not just a wound, but a serious internal injury. Graham stressed that blood vessels were damaged, and it would be nearly impossible to stop the bleeding without the right approach and quick action. The girl admitted that she understands that these vessels cannot be restored, and this is a very serious complication that requires a non-standard solution. However, in her opinion, it is possible to simply remove the spleen to save a life. Even if this method is not ideal, it has the right to life. And this was indeed the right decision from a medical point of view. Removal of the spleen could have been a salvation for the patient. But the problem was that the spleen is located deep in the abdominal cavity, among the intestines and the greater omentum, and it was necessary to figure out how to bypass these organs. Alice explained that if the ligaments holding the spleen were first cut, it would be possible to rotate it freely without affecting or damaging the other organs. The professor couldn't keep up with her thoughts and couldn't immediately understand how she planned to act. Everything seemed too complicated and risky to him. She said she didn't understand why he had doubts, since he had never performed such operations in his life and didn't know all the intricacies of the procedure. Then the girl confidently declared that she was ready to carry out this operation herself. Despite all the complexity and risk, she felt she had the strength. In a short period of time, less than a month spent here, she decided to take such a serious step, which spoke of her courage and confidence. Alice admitted that she knew the professor was worried, but asked him to believe her because she was the one who could save this man. A lot depended on her. Time was not on their side. It was running out, and she asked to give her a chance, assuring that she could cope and save the patient, no matter what. He was sure that she would be the one to save his life, if he gave her at least one chance to show her skills and knowledge. This was his last hope in a critical situation. She began the operation, but quickly realized that one hand was not enough for a successful outcome. Another experienced doctor was needed to help and control the process. The prince, watching what was happening, offered his help, saying that if there was a lack of medical equipment, he was ready to support and provide everything necessary. Everyone was surprised when he took the initiative and began to actively participate, despite the fact that it was beyond his normal duties. It turned out that he already had experience in the war with the angels, where he received more knowledge about medicine than an ordinary civilian and could be useful in this difficult situation. If he is confident in his abilities, then let him help, even if he himself may feel ill during the operation due to stress or fatigue. For the sake of his comrade's life, he was ready to overcome any difficulties and cope with the workload, despite the risk to his own health. For her, this operation was very difficult. She understood that this was not an ordinary case, but a real challenge even for an experienced doctor. She had never had to deal with such serious situations before, so she felt that this was one of the most difficult moments in her practice. The patient's condition could truly be described as one in which his life hung by a thin thread, and any mistake could cost him his death. She turned to the teacher with a request to believe in her, assuring him that with his support and help, she would be able to save the patient and complete the operation. Everything she commented on during the process shocked the gentleman, who did not expect to see such determination and professionalism in such a tense situation. Today, he decided to become a doctor and made every effort to live up to his hopes and become as successful as his idols, the Count and Gretchen. His dream was to become a pioneer of new medicine, like those who changed the world, and he worked hard to get closer to this goal. After some time, the lady was almost completing the complex operation, confidently performing all the necessary manipulations. Her hands worked quickly and accurately. Each step was thought out and honed by experience. The gentleman watching the process could hardly believe his eyes. The woman's skill and concentration were amazing. It seemed that everything was going perfectly, and this gave him hope. The operation was completed successfully, and it could be said that the team worked excellently. All actions were coordinated, and everyone contributed to achieving a positive result. The patient could now begin the path to recovery, because thanks to the successful operation, his condition would improve, and a gradual recovery lay ahead. The professor, who was watching the process, could not believe that she was able to achieve such a result. It was unexpected, and he felt deep respect for her skills. After the stitches were put in, a second blood transfusion had to be performed to maintain the patient's strength and help the body cope with the stress. The lady planned to complete all procedures in the near future, and the gentleman could calmly wait outside, knowing that everything was going according to plan and his loved ones were already safe. Soon the gentleman actually left the operating room, and after some time, he was invited back inside to receive detailed information about the progress of the treatment. Alice reported that the patient was fine, the operation was successful, and all tasks were completed accurately and competently, which inspired confidence in further recovery. The patient will soon fully recover, but will require special attention and care, as there is a risk of complications such as infection or weight loss, which must be carefully monitored. Despite the fact that he was well-versed in medicine and was not an amateur, Alice performed the operation flawlessly, and there was no doubt about it. Everything went well, and the result exceeded expectations. He thought that in this way the girl was trying to avoid the upcoming wedding, choosing an indirect way to avoid marriage. His thoughts did not go beyond this assumption. In the end, he decided to express his gratitude to her for the work she had done, and the girl reacted to this with noticeable surprise, not expecting such a reaction from him. Alice addressed him with respect, noting that he had also done an excellent job today and had provided her with serious assistance during the operation. However, he replied that he had only fulfilled his duty, and the promise to pay for the treatment remained in force and was binding on him. The girl objected that it was not worth paying, because the treatment was very expensive, but the hospital mainly deals with helping people from the lower classes of society. She warned him that when he saw the bill, he might be surprised, but he shouldn't take it as an attempt at deception or a reason to be angry. Deep down, he already thought that she just wanted to make fun of him or test his patience in this way. Alice explained that expenses are always paid and said that she had prepared an official invoice for him for the operation. This operation, she said, was supposed to surprise them, and they might not even be able to understand all the details right away, so it's worth paying attention to the details. The man then warned that he understood that the time had come for him to make an important decision or take action. Suddenly, the prince felt something strange inside, and a sharp pain engulfed him, making him freeze. Alice immediately rushed to him to provide support and help in this unexpected situation. The gentleman felt a little embarrassed by the unexpected concern that came from her. It was unusual for him, and he didn't know how to react to it, because he usually took such things calmly. She said confidently that she was trying to make sure he was okay, and in fact, the concern in her voice sounded genuine and warm, as if she was genuinely concerned about his health and not just going through the motions. The girl carefully noticed that he looked unwell, and in her opinion, he most likely had a high temperature. She decided that she needed to take his temperature to understand how serious his condition was. This attentive remark made him even more embarrassed. His face turned red and he seemed speechless, because he was not used to someone paying such close attention to his condition. He tried to reassure her that there was no need to worry about him, and tried to hide his condition by saying that he was fine, although in reality he didn't feel too well. Despite his assurances, she insisted that even if he didn't want to, he still needed to be examined. If he was experiencing dizziness frequently, it could be a symptom of something serious and couldn't be ignored. She promised that the examination would take only a little time, but he began to insist that everything was fine with him, and there was no point in wasting time on this, trying to avoid attention to his problem. Alice couldn't understand why he was so slow in going to the doctor, because taking care of his health should come first, especially if there are alarming symptoms, and this seemed strange and illogical to her. Then she turned to the gentleman with a request. If the dizziness began to happen more often, he must definitely come to her, and she would be ready to help him as much as she could. At that moment, he became even more embarrassed, because he felt her kindness and sincerity, and this raised even more in him a wave of emotions that he tried to hide. The next day, the action moved to the Imperial Cross Hospital, where his condition was to be checked and, if necessary, treatment would begin. The doctor who attended His Highness was in complete shock from what had happened. This news left him in amazement, and he immediately realized that the matter required immediate intervention. He said that it was urgent to gather all the doctors at the Imperial Cross Hospital to discuss the situation and take the necessary measures. It was important for him to act quickly and decisively. At this time, a man came to the hospital who was interested in what had so urgently called the doctor from his usual work. His appearance meant that the matter was serious and required an explanation. The doctor noted that this hospital was considered a holy place for the entire empire, a shrine among medical institutions, and asked how the young patient who had caused such concern was doing. A conversation began between them, which took place in a friendly and relaxed atmosphere. They found it interesting and pleasant to communicate, despite the seriousness of the issue being discussed. The man came here on important business, and did not hide the fact that he wanted to find out all the details of what happened. He immediately asked what exactly happened to the patient. The doctor listened carefully and asked who exactly performed the operation, as this was crucial for understanding the whole picture and assessing the situation. At first, the man did not immediately understand what kind of operation was being discussed, and it took some time to clarify the details and understand what kind of intervention they had in mind. It turned out that they were talking about a splenectomy, the surgical removal of the spleen, a complex and serious operation that requires high professionalism and precision. The doctor was surprised, and even shocked, that this fact was unknown to him, because knowledge about such operations should be mandatory for a doctor of his level. The man then showed the doctor the notes about the operation, but the handwriting was so bad and illegible that it resembled a child's scribbles, and this caused confusion and irritation in the doctor. The doctor who attended to His Highness reported that he had carefully studied the notes presented, not hiding his surprise and interest in the details. This had made a strong impression on him, and he decided to discuss it with Anton. This behavior seemed simply incredible to all who observed this situation. No one expected that such facts could arouse such keen interest and deep reflection in such an influential person. After reading the notes, he approached Anton with a question, trying to understand how true this data was and what exactly prompted Anton to pay attention to it. He wanted to understand what was so special about it. He was surprised by the incomprehension of why Anton was reacting so emotionally and why he was considering this information seriously. He asked if Anton was ready to believe everything that was stated in this seemingly strange and implausible information. He himself believed that all of this was pure fiction, the fruit of someone's imagination, or unfounded rumors that were not trustworthy and could not serve as a basis for serious decisions. Despite the skepticism, the idea seemed intriguing, and if they were faced with a similar case, they might try to apply this approach, although it seemed extremely difficult. However, Anton insisted that this was not a lie. The patient really was in his hospital. During the operation, a serious injury to the spleen occurred, but the man managed to survive, which seemed almost impossible, and he himself could not believe it. Anton added that the operation was performed by one of the doctors at their hospital, and he had already told about it. This was confirmation that the incident really took place and was not a fabrication. Then he thought about it, trying to understand which of the specialists could perform such a complex operation at such a level, and how realistic it was in their conditions. They continued to discuss the details, trying to understand the situation and weigh the pros and cons, thinking about the next steps and the consequences of this unusual story. He was very keen to learn more about the talented surgeon who had managed to perform such a complex operation, and to learn all the details about his work and methods in order to understand how he had achieved such a result. These doctors were able to perform operations like this that many thought were impossible, and they sought confirmation of their suspicions to assess the surgeon's level of skill. The doctors were sure that the operation itself might seem like a sin to them, but they knew for sure that this particular surgeon was working in the tower at the time, and this confirmed their assumptions. It was this man who received the nickname Nugget for his unique abilities and talent, which distinguished him from other doctors and made him famous in narrow circles. Anton was so amazed by this that he literally burst into flames with happiness and delight, because he understood that in front of him was a truly unusual and outstanding specialist. He decided that he must definitely get this surgeon in his hospital, which was called the Imperial Cross, in order to use his experience and skills for the benefit of the cause. Anton asked to be called immediately because he wanted to know exactly how he was able to come up with such solutions and see everything with his own eyes in real life. However, his friend informed him that this would not be possible, as there were compelling reasons why the surgeon was currently unavailable and could not show up for work. Because of the holy operation, the doctor did not go to work, which came as a surprise and created an atmosphere of mystery and understatement around him. Anton was perplexed, because he was not given an explanation for the surgeon's absence, and he simply stopped coming to work, leaving everyone in suspense. It was reported that he was recording at home as if something serious had happened, and this only increased the anxiety and questions of those around him. Meanwhile, Alice remained in the dark and could not understand what was happening around her and why the situation was causing so much concern. She didn't even want to think about the fact that everything could have happened precisely because of the operation, which seemed important to her, but now became the cause of problems. That day, Alice felt that something had changed, and her intuition told her that the situation was far from simple and that there was something more behind it. It had been several days since Alice had waited for the teacher. Day after day passed, but the teacher was still not there, and this began to worry her more and more. Time dragged on slowly, as if he had simply disappeared. The first, second, third day passed, and the teacher still did not appear. Each time she hoped that she would soon meet him, but her expectations remained in vain, and no one could explain why he did not come out to her. Alice could not understand the reason for his absence. Everything seemed strange and incomprehensible because there were no obstacles to the meeting, and the teacher was not usually distinguished by such isolation. During all this time, only Hansen showed up, coming about his business, but with no news of the teacher's whereabouts or condition. This only added to the uncertainty of the situation. When Alice left for home, she was accompanied by a knight who offered his help and support. He carefully accompanied her to make sure that she would get home safely without any problems. The knight noted that the missus did not have to go to the teacher in person. She could simply call him to her. This would have been easier and more convenient, but Alice thought otherwise and insisted on the visit. She noticed that it would not be difficult for Baron Byron and the teacher to visit her in person. Such a visit was not burdensome for them, and Alice did not doubt their desire to meet. Alice also confidently said that the knight would be able to protect her if any danger suddenly arose. She felt safe next to him, and this gave her peace of mind. The knight sheepishly replied that he would, of course, protect her. In response, she smiled and told him to just trust her, because together they could overcome all difficulties. After some time, the knight reported that they seemed to have already arrived at their destination. His words gave hope that now everything would go according to plan, and they would soon find a teacher. The girl decided that she would go to the meeting with the teacher herself and let the knight wait outside. She wanted to act independently, so as not to create unnecessary problems and not to disturb him. The knight assured her that there was no need to worry. He would wait for her here. This gave Alice a sense of confidence and support, which was very important to her at that moment. After these words, Alice went to the door, knocked, and asked if there was anyone in the house. She wanted to know who was there and whether the teacher was ready to receive her, because now everything depended on this moment. The door was opened by an elderly woman, who looked at the guest attentively and asked who she was. Her gaze was a little tired, but kind, as if she had not seen new faces in these places for a long time. Alice introduced herself and asked carefully if she could find out where the teacher's house was. Her voice sounded polite, with the hope of help, because she really needed this meeting. The woman apologized and explained that, unfortunately, the teacher was currently unavailable, and it would not be possible to meet with him. She looked genuinely upset, as if she wanted to help, but circumstances did not allow it. Despite the refusal, the woman suggested that Alice go inside and rest a little. The room was in a special order, and Alice immediately noticed a lot of books. All of them were devoted to medicine and science. These were not only the works of the Count himself, but also translations of foreign articles. Each book seemed important, as if it contained valuable knowledge collected over many years. The covers of the books were very worn, obviously reread more than once. The woman apologized again, said that they were not expecting guests, but still offered a cup of coffee, the gentleman's favorite drink, to warm up a little and gain strength. She noticed that the teacher was not at home today, not even in sight. It sounded as if it was unusual, and there was a slight note of worry in her voice. Alice thought that the teacher might be ill. However, the woman explained that he was completely immersed in his studies and did not pay attention to the outside world, devoting himself entirely to his work. Alice asked again, trying to understand the situation better. She wanted to make sure that she understood the woman's words correctly, because the explanations were unusual and a little disturbing. The woman said that a few days ago the teacher returned from work, where he witnessed an operation. Since then, he has been immersed in scientific research and practically never leaves the house, trying to understand what he saw. Previously, he could stay at home for a whole day. At most, it took a little time. But now the situation has changed. The advance became noticeably anxious, as if something serious was preventing him from being at peace. Alice was deeply shocked and could not believe that all this anxiety and change was connected precisely with her operation, which seemed to be a turning point in his life. She said that after all his loved ones died, he immersed himself in medicine, as if trying to find meaning and solace in work and knowledge. 20 years ago, during a terrible epidemic, the entire family of the young gentleman perished, and only he and Alice were able to survive. Fate decreed that they managed to survive this catastrophe. Having lost all his loved ones, he decided to devote himself to medicine to fight terrible diseases. The gentleman worked tirelessly, trying to help others and prevent a repeat of the tragedy. What difficult experience did the 10-year-old orphan have to go through to choose the path of a doctor? This question was asked by everyone who knew his story, trying to understand his inner strength. The family fell into decline, having lost its former prosperity, and no one really knew how the gentleman himself managed to endure all the trials. It remained a secret. Alice said that it was time for her to go and asked to convey to the teacher her respect and gratitude for everything he had done and taught her. After these words, she said goodbye to the woman and began to slowly walk away, leaving behind a feeling of completion and slight sadness. The teacher watched her leave from the window, his gaze remaining focused and thoughtful, as if he was trying to read Alice's hidden thoughts. She did come the next day, and in the meantime, he showed up at work as usual. This day was important for both of them, and the anticipation of the meeting hung in the air, creating a special atmosphere. Alice was delighted to see him, and noticed that the boss had asked him to come in immediately after his arrival. It concerned an important operation they had recently discussed, and now everything had to be decided. She said that she understood everything, and said that she would go with him. The girl looked surprised, not expecting to be invited to accompany him to such an important meeting. Alice explained that it was necessary and knocked on the door, saying that it was him. This was a sign that there was no more delay, and the situation required a quick solution. He was immediately let in because he had come with Alice. Their appearance immediately attracted attention, and the atmosphere in the room became tense. The head and Anton were sitting in the room, which added significance to the upcoming conversation. They both looked serious and ready for an important discussion. Alice immediately recognized Viscount Anton, the imperial physician, who was renowned for his reputation and experience. His presence spoke of the importance of the occasion. Her memory flashed back to the times he had helped at court, and how often he had been seen among the nobility, solving complex medical problems. But it wasn't only at court that he was useful. When Alice was little, he sometimes came to their house to treat her, showing care and attention to the family. Now she needed to figure out what to do next, because he knew her, and Alice carefully hid her true status and origin. Anton's face changed immediately. It was clear that he recognized her. This moment became tense, because now it was impossible to hide anything important. He asked who the girl was, and his friend pointed out that she was a student at the hospital, trying to smooth over the awkwardness of the situation. Anton expressed the opinion that she resembled someone from their circle, but most likely it was just a resemblance. According to him, there was no way she could have been a student at the hospital where he worked. Alice quickly figured out how to get out of the situation. She understood that the main thing now was to avoid making mistakes and save face, despite all the difficulties that arose around her. On the outside, everything was far from perfect, and it was noticeable. But the most difficult thing was her character. It was complicated and not always easy to control. The gentleman showed curiosity and asked why Alice did not go to work, since it would seem there were no obstacles to this. In addition, they did not have a free schedule that could allow her to calmly carry out her duties and not be distracted by extraneous matters. The head of the clinic also noted that after her recent misconduct, he could not entrust her with important tasks and responsible work, as this could affect the overall course of the case. Alice was going to go to the doctor because she had not seen him for a long time, and the professor she met said that he knew him well and was following his progress. Anton admitted that he is very interested in how the professor performs such operations, and he literally cannot wait to see the process with his own eyes. The professor made a huge impression on everyone. His operation exceeded all expectations and caused a real wave of admiration. Everyone was confident that this operation would go down in the history of medicine, become an important milestone, and open up new horizons in the field of treatment. However, the professor said that it was he who performed the operation, but all questions and details should be addressed to Alice, who took an active part. Alice was shocked when she learned about this and realized that she now had a lot of responsibility and attention from her colleagues and management. Anton couldn't believe his ears when he heard that this girl had performed such a complicated operation. He couldn't comprehend how someone so young and inexperienced could do something so serious. The professor emphasized again that it was not he who performed the operation, but Alice. He only helped, acting as an assistant. All this sounded so incredible that it caused doubts in everyone present. The headmistress sternly reminded Graham that he had to think carefully about his words. He must not allow himself to joke in the presence of the court physician, for the situation was too serious for frivolous comments. Anton asked again how seriously Graham was saying that this was the girl who performed the operation. He wanted to make sure that he heard correctly and that it was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. Graham swore that he was telling the truth and that he had indeed been merely an assistant, helping Alice during the operation. He emphasized that the main credit went to her. If anyone doubted his words, Graham suggested that they contact another assistant who also participated in the operation and could confirm everything he said. Anton was so shocked that he could not believe the truth of what he heard. It seemed incredible to him that this girl could perform such a complex surgical procedure. He addressed the lady, but she said that she preferred to be called Laura. This added even more surprise to the conversation, because behind the strict formality there was a simple and accessible person. Anton asked whether Laura had actually had the spleen removed, because to him it seemed almost impossible at her age and with her experience. The girl did not know how to answer the unexpected question correctly. Her gaze froze in indecision. The professor watched her carefully, waiting for a reaction and trying to understand her inner state. She was confused and at a loss for words. After all, only a few weeks had passed since she started working, and she was already allowing herself too much, not having worked even a month. This was clearly worrying everyone around her. If she had actually done something wrong, the consequences could have been catastrophic. The patient would not have survived. Such a mistake could have cost lives, and that thought added to the tension in the room. Alice didn't understand why she was so nervous, because everything was going according to plan. She assumed that the intervention would definitely take place and be successful, but now doubts seemed to cover her head. The patient was in a very unstable condition, and she couldn't wait. There was no time left. She folded her hands and concentrated, realizing that she had to act quickly and decisively, otherwise all would be lost. Saving the patient always came first, and given the bet she had made with the Highness, the situation was not so hopeless. Everything was in her favor, and the chances of success were much higher. To win and make a name for herself, she had to be bold and decisive. This was a chance to prove her abilities and show what she could do, despite the doubts of those around her. So she boldly declared that she had performed the spleen removal operation, taking responsibility and proving her competence. This statement caused a storm of emotions among those present. The whole team was shocked. No one expected that she could perform such a complex operation. No one could simply believe that a newbie took on such responsibility and managed to complete the task. At this point, Anton asked if she had really written a report on the work done, trying to understand how sincerely and in detail the entire situation was reflected in the documents. The girl confirmed everything that had been said earlier and explained that she had described each stage of the operation in detail, not missing any important details, and explaining exactly how the procedure had been carried out, so that it would be clear that she was fully in control of the situation. Anton simply couldn't find the words. He didn't even expect to hear this from her, and didn't know how to react, because she wasn't a doctor, but she told everything very confidently and professionally, surprising him. He admitted that he couldn't believe his ears, because as far as he knew, the girl had not worked in a hospital and didn't even have experience for more than a few weeks, which made her story even more incredible. Moreover, if everything she said was true, Anton asked her to tell him more about the operation itself in order to understand how she managed to cope with such a difficult task without experience. The girl began to explain who helped her and how she acted, thought through each step, and how accurately she followed the plan, demonstrating deep knowledge and understanding of the entire procedure. The man couldn't even believe that she could possess such extensive knowledge, which usually requires many years of study and practice, and with every word she said, he became more and more surprised. She spoke so professionally that Anton imagined the entire process as if he were listening to a lecture by an experienced medical specialist, and his brain drew entire scenes of what was happening in the operating room. The girl's words completely matched her actions, and Professor Graham could guarantee the veracity of her story, because he was personally acquainted with her and her skills. If Professor Graham claimed this, then the story was true, and the girl really was able to do everything she described, despite her status as a student. Still, Anton remained puzzled as to how she had managed to perform such a complex operation, given her young age and lack of experience, which seemed impossible. After all, she was just learning, but she was already able to independently carry out a complex procedure, which was a real breakthrough and a reason for admiration. The girl could not find the words to explain to him that in another world she was a surgeon. He considered it just crazy, because for him it was incomprehensible and unbelievable. Then she tried to explain that in fact this was not the first time something like this had happened to her, although not in the literal sense that she had already operated on someone before. She explained that she did not mean the experience of performing the operation, but that she had thought about this issue for a very long time and carefully, developing a plan of action in her head down to the smallest detail. Since childhood, she had a dream of becoming a doctor, and she studied a huge amount of medical literature, including a monograph on modern medicine by Professor Graham. As she read, she mentally performed an operation, adjusting her understanding and approaches, as if she were in a constant brainstorming session where every detail mattered. The main thing was that she reached a level where she could understand the works of specialists and even find new methods of treatment, based on the knowledge and logic she had acquired. He had a hard time believing her words, realizing that the girl was not very good at hiding lies, and his mistrust was increased by the fact that she was a mediocre actress. Alice was upset that her attempts to convince him were unsuccessful, and she felt bad about her own lack of persuasiveness. She then said that she was simply wondering whether it was possible to restore blood vessels after the spleen was removed, because for her the main thing was to save the patient's life, and not just follow the protocol. This operation, although it was only in her head, was already completely planned and thought out to the smallest detail, as if she had created it herself and worked it out in advance. In the end, she relied only on her knowledge and the information she had received earlier, and was able to put everything into practice, which from her story made it look like she was a real genius. Graham noted that although they had not worked together for long, he knew Alice and her character well. He emphasized that she was completely incapable of lying, and this made her special in his eyes. Moreover, with her abilities, such an operation would not have caused her any problems at all. It was quite within her capabilities. Her talent and skills clearly distinguished her from her colleagues. Alice was more gifted than any other doctor Graham had ever encountered. He saw her not as a mere student, but as a true professional with extraordinary skills. Despite this, he realized that there was simply nothing more to teach her, because she was already at a level comparable to his own. The brilliant and self-confident Graham himself, a man with a big ego, allowed himself such an assessment, and it meant a lot. Then Anton suggested that Alice leave this hospital and go to work at the Imperial Cross Hospital, where the level is completely different. The Imperial Cross Hospital is a prestigious medical institution, the true pinnacle of the Empire's medical system. Only the best of the best are accepted there, those who can truly be called geniuses in medicine, and Alice received an invitation there. The head doctor was indignant and began shouting that Anton had gone crazy, suggesting that such a young and inexperienced, in his opinion, girl, be brought to their institution. Anton noted that a doctor capable of handling such a complex operation undoubtedly possesses the necessary qualities and talents to work in this hospital. Besides, he was interested in watching her. He wanted to see how great a talent Alice could show in the future. Doctors and management were waiting with interest to see what else this girl would surprise everyone with in the future, because her potential was truly enormous. He agreed to help and asked how he could get her into the hospital, given that she did not have a license. He knew that the hospital did not accept postgraduate students without this document, and besides, she did not have a license. Anton was completely confused by the fact that she did not have a license. The head doctor noted that she could not have a license, since less than a month had passed since her arrival, and there was no time to obtain a license yet. Therefore, she simply needs to get a license. This is the only way out of the situation, and there should be no doubts or additional conditions about this. Everything should be resolved only by this. The licensing exam is scheduled to take place immediately after the celebration of Her Highness's birthday, and she will have the opportunity to simply take the exam and thus obtain the necessary documents. Never before had a graduate student passed an exam so early, and especially so successfully. The doctor was surprised, asking what would happen to her guarantors, without whom the exam could not be passed. To obtain a license, she needs recommendations from 3 professors. Anton said he was ready to act as one of them, and the head doctor and Professor Graham, who know her well, could also do so. The head physician tried several times to refuse to act as Graham's guarantor, reluctantly agreeing, and this caused some tension in the conversation. Finally, the head doctor asked how capable she really was of passing the exam, not doubting her abilities, but being cautious because of the difficulty of the upcoming test. He noted that this year the exam will be much more difficult than usual, and one will have to prepare for it very seriously. Otherwise, there will be almost no chance of success. Anton, without losing confidence, reminded her of His Highness's order, emphasizing that the order for her admission had indeed arrived, and now all that remained was to complete the formalities. This year's exam for postgraduate students promises to be particularly challenging, as they are required to be highly prepared. Qualified students must demonstrate not just knowledge, but real skills to pass the test. It was said that the test would be so tough that only the truly worthy would be able to pass. The selection would be strict, so as not to miss those who truly deserve to continue their studies and develop in science. Anton believed in Elisa's success because she had already successfully completed a serious operation. She is the person who should pass this exam because she has the necessary knowledge and experience to confirm her qualifications. Perhaps His Highness specifically set such a difficult exam in order to identify among the many those talented ones who will not go unnoticed and will be able to truly prove themselves. This year, it is doubtful that anyone will be able to pass the exam at all. The level of requirements is so high that most will probably fail the test and not be able to move on. Anton asked Alice if she thought she could pass this difficult exam and cope with the task set, because a lot was expected of her and the responsibility was high. Alice admitted that there was still a lot to learn and improve, but she would be honored to have the opportunity to take this exam and prove her abilities. Anton was very curious to see how well she would cope with the upcoming tests, and he eagerly awaited the results, wanting to see her success. He couldn't wait for this moment, while Alice herself went out for a walk to get a little distracted and prepare mentally for the exam. Everything turned out unexpectedly, but very well. If not for the circumstances, she would have had to come up with something completely different to cope with the situation. However, events took a successful turn, as if everything itself had developed in the right direction. She couldn't even imagine that the emperor would decide to issue such a decree. She was confused and surprised as to why he needed to make such a decision right now, because the meaning of it remained unclear and mysterious to her. Perhaps the reason lies in herself, although she desperately does not want to believe it. Everything seemed too strange and illogical, and an inner voice told her that there was something more behind this than just chance. Be that as it may, the exam is very close. There is very little time left to prepare, and the holiday is just around the corner. Soon the celebration will begin, which she must meet fully armed and be ready for anything. As far as she could remember from her past life, much seemed both familiar and alien. Memory brought back fragments of events that now felt completely different than before. When she turned 16, the celebration of this day was truly special. At that moment, many significant events took place that left their mark on her soul and memory for many years. The most important thing that day was the announcement of her engagement to the Crown Prince. This news changed everything, opening a new page in her life, filled with hopes and expectations that then seemed bright and joyful. Remembering that moment, she felt the happiness that had engulfed her then, although it was from this beginning that a chain of tragic events began that forever changed her destiny and threatened all her dreams. But now, this year, the engagement will not take place. Fate has made its adjustments and plans have changed, forcing her to look at the situation from a different angle, abandoning those hopes that previously seemed unshakable. It is still too early to think about the fact that the bride of the Highness should be announced on the day of the celebration. This was reported at a meeting of the ministry, emphasizing the importance and seriousness of this decision, despite its unexpectedness. His Highness could not simply ignore an important message addressed to the citizens. Such a decision required special attention because it concerned everyone who followed the events and waited for news from the court. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the introduction of the bride, who was to become part of the royal family. But until now, her name had not been officially announced, and this only fueled interest and speculation in society. She shouldn't have to worry about what was happening at the moment, because she could be sure that His Majesty would take care of everything carefully and deal with the situation without unnecessary worries. It seemed that it was enough to stop worrying, because it was time to focus on business and return to work, not allowing oneself to be distracted by empty doubts and guesses. After some time, she met the same gentleman who had been an assistant during her operation and played an important role in the medical team. He was glad to see Alice, and the lady herself asked him for what purpose he was here now, and what brought him into her circle at this moment. She assumed that this gentleman belonged to a noble family, because he wore the coat of arms of the royal family, a sign of high origin and special status. Perhaps he learned of her origin from the de Roland family, which could explain his attention and interest, since their families were connected by long traditions. At the same time, she could not understand why he was looking at her so attentively and intently, which caused her a mixture of curiosity and slight wariness. She thought he wanted to say something, but at the same time she assured herself that he had no special intentions on his part, and that he was simply observing without ulterior motives. He expressed a desire to meet her, explaining that he wanted to verify something important to himself. It was unexpected and a little mysterious, but it was of great importance to him. The girl did not understand what exactly he was talking about. She was confused and tried to figure out his intentions, but the meaning of his words remained unclear and confusing to her. A minute later, he announced that he had satisfied himself of what he wanted, and was now going to take his leave and leave, as if his task had been accomplished and the conversation over. Suddenly, it dawned on her, and she tried to stop him to talk to him again, but she didn't have time to say anything meaningful because he was already about to leave. She grabbed his hand abruptly, which confused him because he couldn't understand why she did it and what would happen now. The girl said that he needed to get checked urgently, insisting that it was very important and that taking care of his health could not be delayed. She remembered that he often complained of dizziness, and now she understood that such symptoms could not be ignored and that his condition needed to be checked as soon as possible. She asked permission to take care of him, emphasizing that it was her responsibility, and she did not intend to leave things as they were without attention. She led him into the office and invited him to sit down to begin the examination. The place was prepared, and the atmosphere hinted at the seriousness of the upcoming procedure. He asked in surprise what exactly she was going to do, since his intentions did not include meeting her, but Alice replied that she simply wanted to examine him carefully, as she had said earlier. Even though the prince had not originally planned to meet her, his feet seemed to have led him there on their own, because he really felt constantly tired and overtired, which required attention. Baron Anton couldn't even figure out what the problem was, so he doubted that anyone could help. Even if she examined him, it was unlikely that she would be able to find the cause of the illness or cure him. He couldn't just refuse her help rudely, even though he knew nothing would really change. It seemed like he would have to accept the situation and give her a chance to try, even if the chances were slim. The lady noticed that he looked very pale and decided to find out how long he had been feeling unwell. Her attention was focused on understanding how serious the situation was. The principal replied that the malaise had lasted for about 2 months. This seemed long enough for the condition to worsen, and now one could understand how deep the problem was. She asked him how he was eating, whether he had lost weight, as this could be an important sign. He admitted that his appetite was weaker than before, and this made him worried. Then she asked him what exactly he felt when he had dizziness. He tried to explain all the symptoms in as much detail as possible to give her a full picture of the condition. The questions she asked were very similar to those asked by Baron Anton, as if she was checking everything again so as not to miss a single detail. After that, she said that now they could move on to the examination. He asked what exactly she was going to do, as he was a little wary and wanted to understand what to expect. She explained that she was only going to take his temperature and check his skin for any outward signs of illness. It seemed like a fairly standard procedure. The temperature was slightly lower. The skin was dry, which made her suspicious. She decided to carefully check all the signs so as not to miss anything important. Princip noticed that she was touching him for too long during the examination, and he wondered if she did this with every patient. It made him slightly irritated. His nervousness suddenly increased, and the girl felt an unpleasant energy from him, as if something was going wrong. This made her wary and think that the matter could be more serious. She apologized for her behavior, but insisted on examining him carefully because it was necessary. She knew it was important, and that without it, the whole picture could not be understood. Her insistence made him blush and turn away, embarrassed by the attention that was falling on him. He was not used to such circumstances and felt awkward. She noted that she could better understand his condition if she examined his neck, assuring him that it would take only a short time and would not cause him much discomfort. He froze in place, not understanding that it was possible to examine one area of the body for so long and so carefully, and was a little surprised by her methods. The prince asked how long this inspection would last. She replied that she was almost finished, only needed to double-check the details, after which she would report the results. He couldn't believe that she touched everyone so carefully and attentively. It made him think that now he would have to wait until she finished the examination. Alice asked him for a couple of minutes to complete the necessary procedures and prepare conclusions about his condition. She also asked him if he had any other pain, to which he replied that he only felt normal fatigue, without any serious symptoms. She asked a lot of questions that made him wonder, because he didn't understand how she could know so much about his condition. Alice explained that his dizziness and fatigue were most likely caused by de Kuerken's tenosynovitis, an inflammation that affects the tendons and causes similar symptoms. He developed inflammation of the thyroid gland due to problems with the island, and now it does not cope with its task. This caused a serious hormonal imbalance, which affects his general condition and well-being. No one in his circle had ever encountered such a disease before, and it seems to be a rather rare and unusual case. Doctors are still poorly informed about such a disease, and such patients are very rare. When the woman explained all the details of his condition, the prince took it with some unpleasant surprise. All the symptoms exactly matched what had been bothering him for the past few months, confirming the diagnosis. The doctor said that she would prescribe him several medications that should help restore normal thyroid function. Thanks to this, all the unpleasant manifestations and symptoms should disappear over time. She asked that the medications be given by pharmacists with detailed instructions and stressed the importance of taking the medications regularly. Neglecting treatment is not an option, it is critical for restoring health. She also asked to be seen again in 3 days to check her condition and assess the effectiveness of the prescribed treatment. This was necessary to adjust the therapy. At your follow-up visit, your doctor may prescribe additional medications or procedures if your current therapy is not working properly, in order to better monitor your recovery. Full recovery of the body could take several months, so it was important for him to undergo regular medical examinations. This helped to monitor the dynamics of recovery and promptly respond to any changes in health. If it was difficult for him to get to this clinic, she was ready to issue a referral to another specialist. Nevertheless, he said that he would definitely come in 3 days, despite all the inconveniences and difficulties of the journey. After a short farewell, he began to walk away, not lingering and leaving behind a slight sense of mystery. His departure was calm, but at the same time, it gave the feeling that this was only the beginning of something important and unusual. Thus began her regular meetings with Mr. Wren, who used a false name, hiding his true identity and title. He did not reveal that he was actually the crown prince, preferring to remain in the shadows. The head physician went to the Marquis to personally tell him about the state of affairs in the hospital and discuss plans for the future. The meeting was important because much depended on it, including the fate of patients and the development of the medical institution. They sat down together over a cup of tea and began to discuss pressing issues. The atmosphere was calm but serious. Everyone tried to convey their opinion and find a common language on important topics. Market mentioned that he knew a girl in the hospital named Laura. He spoke of her with warmth, as if this information could somehow influence the discussion or further decisions. The head doctor confirmed that he certainly knew Laura and spoke positively of her. This added credibility to Market's words and strengthened the confidence that the conversation was going in the right direction. The Marchespantian asked how she was doing, and the head doctor replied that everything was great, even better than expected. He noted that Laura was a true genius, and her successes impressed everyone who worked with her. The father was shocked by what he heard. It was hard for him to believe the doctor's words, because the situation seemed almost unbelievable. This added tension and anticipation for further news. He also asked if Laura had ever been rude to anyone, as it was important for him to know not only the girl's successes, but also her character in order to understand her completely. The head doctor assured that she had golden hands and that she always behaved with dignity and respect. This completely disproved any doubts and painted Laura as an ideal specialist and person. The Marquise was hesitant to speak of the young girl so early, but Madame Laura was indeed a born doctor. Her talent and passion for medicine were evident to all who met her, and it could not fail to impress. The Marquise was sincerely grateful to the head physician for deciding to visit him personally. Such a visit meant respect and trust, and this gave him confidence in his further steps. The head doctor wondered why the Marquis was so interested in Laura. Perhaps he had a daughter who looked like this girl, and he was trying to figure out if it was somehow connected to the family. But it was hard to imagine that his own daughter could be a terrible, selfish, and rude person. After all, the Marquise knew something completely different about her, and such thoughts seemed impossible. In his room, the Marquis stood in front of Taylor's portrait and thought. He realized that Alice probably had the same features as her mother. He had been waiting for a long time for the moment when she would finally grow up and prove herself. Alice worked hard at Taylor's hospital, as if she wanted to make all the dreams her mother couldn't come true. This made her even more special in the eyes of those around her. Alice had changed so much, and for the better lately, that the Marquise felt he did not want to give her to anyone else. She had become a real treasure that needed to be protected. This thought even worried him a little, because he understood that the time would come when he would have to let go. But for now, he could not get rid of the feeling of anxiety. He felt like a hare in danger. He didn't know what to do or which path to choose in this difficult situation, which was becoming more and more confusing. At this time, the king called the chief physician to him, reminding him of the importance of their meetings and the decisions that needed to be made, because much depended on their joint efforts and wisdom. The king inquired whether the work at the Tylus hospital where he worked was not too hard, and asked whether they had any serious problems there that required his attention. It was important for him to know the state of affairs personally. The head physician expressed gratitude for the attention shown and assured the king that everything was going well in the hospital. The king noted that such successes were made possible by the efforts of the Marquise, who runs the institution. The king also asked if the head doctor was familiar with a girl named Laura Svitaya, since she was assigned to work in this hospital. He wanted to understand how things were going with her work and reputation. The head doctor admitted with surprise that he actually knew the girl. His answer showed that Laura Svitaya had already attracted attention with her presence in the hospital and aroused the interest of the management. Previously, he knew little about her, but now, according to the king, there are even more questions and discussions about her. Apparently, her activities are attracting a certain amount of attention among colleagues and senior officials. The king asked the head physician to tell him details about Laura Svitaya, and after the story, he was simply delighted with her qualities and abilities. The girl seemed to him very talented and worthy of respect. The king also asked whether the preparation for the upcoming exam, which is scheduled to take place this year, is proceeding without complications, as it is an important event for all doctors at the hospital. He noted that the lives of other people are in the hands of medical workers, so only those who are truly a real specialist and can justify the trust should pass the exam. The head physician fully agreed with the king and assured that the preparations were going well, and everything would be organized at the highest level so that the exam would go smoothly and bring good results. The king doubted that Alice would survive even a couple of days in such conditions, and was surprised by her fortitude. However, he could not fully trust his words, and suspected that there was some intrigue involved in this matter. In his opinion, Alice clearly knew how to hide her origins, and was an extremely intelligent girl, which made her situation even more mysterious and difficult to understand. The king was sure that the anniversary would be a wonderful celebration, at which Alice must be present, because her contribution and role in the life of the court were very significant and noticeable to everyone. Everyone was excitedly discussing the prince's upcoming engagement, which was to be announced soon. The conversation was filled with various assumptions about how this event would affect the future of the country and the royal family. Many assured that the prince had all the qualities to become a worthy and skillful ruler. They said that he was already showing himself in governance and could cope with the most difficult state affairs. He was considered to be involved in important matters, and this was positively assessed at the highest level. He was praised for his abilities, noting that he had every chance of becoming an outstanding emperor in the future. All these news and rumors they learned from newspapers, which carefully monitored every move and decision of the prince. Newspapers served as the main source of information for discussions and gossip. However, they were more interested in who would become the prince's girlfriend. They hoped that the chosen one would be worthy and would be able to adequately support the future emperor on his difficult path. A few days later, the prince arrived for another checkup, which was part of his medical checkup. This caused much anticipation and talk, as he looked better and better. The girl who examined him asked him if he had any worries or concerns, but he replied that he did not feel anything like that, feeling quite calm. The prince did not understand why she was in such a hurry to finish the examinations, because he had enough time to recover, and everything could be done gradually, without rushing. The girl said that the next examination would be the last one, and after that, he would no longer have to come for such checkups, since the treatment was almost complete. He asked again in surprise, confirming what he had heard, because just recently he had thought that he would like to see her more often, and now such an outcome caused him slight regret. The lady assured that he had almost completely recovered, and there was no need to worry. Medicines would still be delivered, but only to complete the course of treatment and consolidate the result. She couldn't understand why he was so angry. Perhaps it was because he was so upset about what had happened. It had clearly thrown him off balance and made him act differently than usual. Ryan approached the prince to ask where he had run away from his job. He wanted to understand the reasons for such a sudden departure, and why the prince had decided to step away from his duties at that moment. The prince replied that he hoped for understanding from Ryan, who in turn said that if the prince had any problems or concerns, he was always ready to listen and help find a way out of a difficult situation. In fact, the crown prince's main problem was not his work at all, but his sister. It was she who caused him a lot of trouble and worries, creating an uneasy atmosphere around him. So the prince immediately clarified what exactly he meant when he spoke about Ryan's sister. It was a very important topic that worried him the most, and he wanted to talk about it openly. He admitted that he would like to repay his sister one debt, but it should not be taken as something serious. Rather, it was a sweet and touching little thing that meant a lot to him personally. Ryan thought about the prince's words and noted that Alice really loved to eat. He remembered how her mood was often improved by delicious food and sweets. Apparently, strawberry cake was her favorite treat. The prince told her about many other sweets that she adored, showing his good knowledge of his sister's tastes. The prince asked him what gold he could give as a token of his feelings. Such a gift was supposed to be a symbol of the sincerity and importance of his intentions towards Alice. The prince realized that he did not even have the courage to ask such a question, or even to touch a lady's hand. It was not in his character, and he realized how far such displays of affection and intimacy had gone from him. His brother Michael is clearly much more experienced and confident in such matters. He has long been accustomed to dealing with such situations and knows how to behave correctly in order to achieve the desired result. But despite this, he certainly wasn't going to turn to Michael for help. Something happened that day for which neither he nor anyone else would ever be forgiven, and it would forever remain in his memory. Ryan, in turn, remembered that Alice always liked shiny jewelry. She liked beautiful dresses, and he decided that this would be a good gift that she would definitely like. The prince noted that jewelry is still better than any sweets or cakes, which are quickly eaten and forgotten, but a beautiful gift remains for a long time. However, he wondered if Alice would really like all this. He doubted that she would take such a gift as he thought, because she had always been very particular in her tastes. Still, he decided that consulting with her brother was the right decision, because he knew better what would really suit and be pleasant for Alice. When he arrived, Alice immediately said that she could not accept the apology and asked for forgiveness herself, because everything was too difficult and unpleasant for her. He tried to explain that he simply wanted to express his gratitude, but the girl quickly pointed out that he should understand her better, since she was a doctor and understood such matters. Alice noted that she still appreciated the attention, but he said that there was no need to worry, although he would like to somehow thank her for her help, even with a small gesture. He remembered that she was no longer the same as she had been in childhood, when she loved only expensive trinkets and valued nothing else. The girl said that if he wanted to show his gratitude, he could simply pay the bill for the treatment. That would be quite enough, and much better than any gifts. She noticed that she really didn't need anything, but since he was so determined to thank her, she decided not to refuse. His sincere kindness and desire to help could not leave her indifferent. This little piece of strawberry cake promised to be the most delicious treat. Its sweetness and tenderness seemed to promise a joy that was hard to compare with anything else. It would be great if at their next meeting, he brought her a treat from the bakery on Peak Street. They sold the most delicious pastries and cakes she had ever tasted. She admitted that she loved cakes, but her mother strictly forbade her to eat a lot of them, considering it harmful to her health. Despite the prohibitions, the desire for sweets did not leave her. He remembered Ryan's words and asked her what other sweets she liked. His attention to detail showed genuine interest and concern, which confused her a little. Confused, she wondered how he could know about her favorite treats. It reminded her that there was more to his every action than just chance. He smiled and said that he would now take care of her, and that these sweets would always be her lunch. This promise sounded like a sign of special attitude and attention. After these words, he calmly turned around and began to leave, leaving her in thought and slight excitement. His action made her heart beat a little faster. Alice was completely shocked and even embarrassed by such unexpected care and attention. She was not used to feeling herself in the center of such a warm attitude, and it touched her to the depths of her soul. She watched her mother and father pick out a dress that was too bright and unsuitable for her. The sight left her with mixed feelings and a quiet resistance. It seemed that for them, any event would be a reason for celebration, even in a hospital where there are usually no days off, especially on such eve of important days. The atmosphere seemed to become a little warmer and more joyful. In her past life, Alice's stepmother died of a serious illness, and now the girl was determined to save her, to correct past mistakes, and give her a chance for a different fate. This became her important goal. Garrett walked up to Alice and noticed that she wasn't preparing for the day ahead, even though it was important. He wondered why she was so calm about it and not showing her usual fuss. Elisa replied that she had already prepared and would wear the same dress for the party as last time. She mentioned the blogger's words, but it was clear that she was not very interested in it anyway, and the preparations did not bother her much. Of course, she had mastered the knowledge of earthly medicine quite well, but now she needed not only to study the theory of local medicine, but also to learn how to apply it in practice in order to be truly useful. Alice was going to come to the party, but not for long. She didn't want to linger because immediately after the celebration, she had further studies and other important matters that could not be delayed. The brother noticed that his sister's face was pale and inquired about her condition. He asked her to put her books aside and at least rest a little, because her appearance was truly disturbing. He insisted that he himself would take her to her chambers, because she stubbornly disobeyed and continued to study, ignoring fatigue and warnings about her health. Garrett helped Alice into bed, and everything around her seemed flushed with tension and illness. Her condition was worsening, despite her best efforts to stay fit. However, the illness overcame her, and now she could no longer ignore the weakness and malaise that gradually took over her will. Today was a holiday, but Alice did not understand how to behave and what to do next, because her strength was leaving her, and her head was full of disturbing thoughts and doubts. Brother came into the room and asked if she had written to anyone. Apparently, it was time to get ready. D-Man was standing nearby and was surprised to notice that she was still lying in bed, as if she was not going to get up. When his brother came closer, he was overcome with real shock. He did not expect to see such a state at all, and his gaze became tense and serious. He noticed that there was a doctor in the room who had already begun his examination, carefully checking the girl's condition and recording her symptoms. The girl explained that all her symptoms were similar to an upper respiratory infection, as if she had been struggling with a cold and fatigue for a long time. The doctor confirmed that she had a fever, and, as she suspected, the diagnosis looked like a lung infection affecting the upper respiratory tract. The brothers were in complete shock and immediately asked the doctor if she would be okay and if she would recover quickly. The doctor assured them that the disease was not too dangerous and that she should get better in time if she gave herself enough rest and did not overexert herself. However, the doctor prescribed medication to reduce the temperature and insisted that they strictly monitor the girl to ensure that she took the pills on time. Her father firmly stated that on this day she was strictly forbidden to leave the house or visit the hospital so as not to worsen her condition. Alice was completely perplexed and shocked by her father's strict reaction. She could not understand why they were treating her so harshly right now. The father began to shout, blaming her for the illness and accusing her of working too much, which was the reason for her weakness and malaise. One of the brothers tried to soften the situation and agreed that Alice should be more careful and take better care of herself so as not to bring herself to illness. However, Alice herself firmly stated that she would not get sick again and would not overwork herself anymore, asking everyone not to be angry and to take her word for it. She was so sweet and sincere that it quickly calmed everyone around her, and the tension in the room immediately decreased, replaced by care and understanding. Her brother noticed that she was like that and assumed that she would not be able to attend the celebration. His words were full of doubts, because her health was not very good, and her appearance at the celebration seemed unlikely. She replied that she really felt pain and might not go if the emperor did not object. At the same time, she emphasized that if the emperor made a remark, he could settle everything personally. She decided that she would go anyway, but she would behave quietly, sit quietly, and after the official part was over, she would immediately go home. Her goal was not to interfere and not to attract attention to herself. She didn't care, because apart from being present at the celebration, she had no important matters that required her participation. She understood that she was not capable of solving any serious issues now. She insisted that everything would go well, since this was her first experience of this kind. No serious responsibilities, just a formal presence, and that was it. Mother asked Alice if she was really okay as they were getting out of the carriage, showing concern and a little worry for her daughter. Noticing her condition, after the emperor's speech ended, the guests began to disperse, and they too were getting ready to leave so as not to linger longer than necessary. Alice explained that she just had a cold, and there was nothing to worry about. She wanted to calm those around her so that they would not worry and think about serious problems. After everyone had left, Alice was left completely alone in the great hall, which left her feeling lonely and somewhat confused. She decided to just rest. She was very tired and dreamed of going home as soon as possible, where she could regain her strength and forget about the hustle and bustle of the holiday. Suddenly, it was announced that His Royal Highness had arrived, and this event attracted the attention of all those present, restoring the atmosphere of excitement. They were present when His Highness met the Crown Prince. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone was trying to understand what was happening between them, because this event was rare and important for everyone. It was surprising to see the Crown Prince here, as he always avoided such receptions. His attitude towards official meetings was cold and distant, which only added to the interest of the situation. They noticed that the prince was looking intently for someone, as if he expected to see exactly that person. Suddenly, he stopped his gaze on Alice, causing everyone to be slightly surprised and confused. Alice was surprised that his gaze fell on her. It was unexpected and even a little alarming, because she was not used to such attention from high-ranking persons. However, she decided that she was too distant and too strong for any of them to harm her. So the idea that he might look at her with ill intentions seemed unlikely to her. Perhaps he would also be present at the event today, and his appearance was expected to happen soon. Everyone was waiting for this moment, anticipating the development of events and possible consequences. Alice thought about Michael, her only friend from her past life. She was sure that only she remembered him, and this memory gave her comfort and strength in the present. At that moment, Miss Child came up to her. She noticed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and asked how Alice was doing during this difficult month. There had been a long-standing rivalry between the Child and de Roland families, which had lasted for many years. Moreover, Alice remembered that in her past life, their relationship had been much more complicated and tense. At the same time, Alice knew that Miss Child, like herself, was in love with the Crown Prince. This common weakness only increased the enmity between them, despite the apparent external calm. The enmity between them was so strong that it seemed as if all this was not worth the energy they spent on rivalry and resentment. Alice knew it was all pointless, and that it was better to focus on her goals. She decided that it would be better for her to become an empress, rather than Miss Child. In her thoughts, Alice was determined to achieve her goal, realizing that only in this way could she change her destiny and influence on those around her.